Welcome to Harry's Cosmos. Today's adventure: what if an ancient black family pact betrothed Harry and Hermione as children? If you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Now, let's begin. Chapter 1. The ink that remembers the owl came at breakfast, which was the wrong time for it, and it did not come for Harry. He noticed that much before anything else, before the seal, before the weight of the thing, before Aunt Petunia's toast went still halfway to her mouth, the owl swept in through the kitchen window Uncle Vernon had left open against the July heat, and it did not so much as glance at the skinny 11-year-old crouched by the cupboard. It landed on the back of Dudley's chair, folded its wings with the disdain of a creature that had flown a long way to be here and did not think much of the destination, and stuck out one leg. A cream envelope hung from it, heavy as a slab of butter, and the wax on the flap was black. For a moment the Dursleys' kitchen held the particular silence of a house that has decided, collectively and without discussion, to pretend a thing is not happening. Then the owl made a small impatient sound, and Vernon's face went the color of corned beef. "Out," he said. "Out, out, get it out." The owl ignored him. It shook its leg again, and this time Harry saw where the envelope was pointing, saw the loops of green ink across the front, and his stomach did something cold and slow. It was not addressed to him at all. Miss Hermione Jean Granger, the front read, and then, beneath, a house number and a street in a town Harry had never heard of, and beneath that, in smaller letters that seemed to have been added by a different hand entirely. One that pressed harder that seemed to have been added by a different hand entirely. One that pressed harder, that dug the nib into the paper. By the standing compact of the House of Black. That's not. Harry started and stopped because he did not know how to finish it. That's not for me was true and useless. That's not for anyone in this house was truer. The owl, hearing a voice at last that was neither shrieking at it nor cowering from it, turned its head and fixed Harry with one round amber eye, and held out the leg to him like he had been the point all along. He untied it because there was nothing else to do. The string was cold. The wax was colder, and when his thumb passed over the seal, he felt the shape pressed into it. A shield, a raven, a scatter of stars, and around the edge, so fine he had to tilt it to the light. Letters in a language he could not read. The moment his skin touched the seal, the kitchen went quiet in a new way. Not the pretending silence of before. A held breath. The air did the thing it does before thunder. Then the seal cracked, and the envelope was not addressed to Hermione Granger anymore. Harry watched it happen. The green ink writhed, thinned, drew itself into new shapes the way frost climbs a window, and where the name had been, there were now two names, one under the other, bracketed together by a single curling line. Someone drawing a stave to hold two notes in a chord. Miss Hermione Jean Granger, Mr. Harry James Potter. And under that, in the harder hand, the words he would spend the next 7 years trying to unmake. The compact holds. Present yourselves. Boy. Vernon's voice had gone very quiet, which was worse than the shouting. "What is that?" "I don't know," Harry said. And for once, it was the whole truth. 200 miles north and west, in a semi-detached house with a blue door and a garden gone to lavender, a girl the same age was having a better morning than Harry and a worse one than she knew. Hermione Granger had received owls before. 3 weeks earlier, a professor with a pointed hat had sat in her parents' front room and explained, over tea, that magic was real and that Hermione was going to a school in Scotland to learn it, and Hermione had asked 41 questions and taken notes, and the professor had left looking like she had been through something. Since then, the house had filled with books. Hermione had read all of them twice. She had learned that she was, in a word she found she quite liked, a witch, and she had decided, in her methodical way, that if she was going to be a witch, she was going to be a very good one, the way she had decided everything about herself so far. So when the owl came, and it was the second owl of the morning, which she found interesting because the first had brought only the ordinary reminder about the train, she was not frightened. She was delighted. She was already reaching for her notebook. Her mother read the envelope over her shoulder and said, "By the standing compact of the House of what?" "Black," Hermione said. "It's a family. There's a whole chapter on the old wizarding houses in, hang on." She had the letter open. She had in fact opened it before her father could say wait, don't, which was a habit that would define a great deal of her life. The wax split. The names appeared, hers and then a boy's, joined by that single curling line, and Hermione felt something settle over her hand, like a glove made of cold water, and then be gone. She read the second line. "The compact holds. Present yourselves." "Present ourselves to what?" said her father. Reading it too, and Hermione, who had already found the relevant page in one of the new books and had her finger on it, discovered that her voice was not entirely steady. "There's a footnote," she said. "In Knatesbury's old houses and their instruments. It says the House of Black kept marriage compacts, betrothal contracts, sealed into the family magic. And it says," she stopped. She read it again to be sure she was reading it right, because she was a careful girl, and this was not the sort of thing you got wrong. "It says the sealed ones can't be broken by the people they're made for, only by the magic that made them. It says the children of a compact are bound at the naming and the binding." Hermione. Her mother had crouched down to be level with her, the way she did when Hermione was small and had woken from a bad dream. "Bound how?" Hermione looked at the stranger's name on the letter, Harry James Potter. She did not know him. She had never heard of him. And yet when she looked at the two names sitting there in their bracket of ink, she had the disorienting sense of looking at a photograph of herself standing next to a stranger, as if the picture had already been taken years ago, and she was only now being shown it. "I don't know," she said, and hated it because Hermione Granger always knew that was the entire point of her. "But I think we have to find out." The man who came to explain it was not what either of them expected, which was its own kind of lesson about the world they were being let into. He came to the Grangers first, because the Grangers had written to the address on the letter. A long, thin house in London, number 12 of a square that did not, the reply insisted, exist for anyone who had not been told it existed. And because the Grangers, being reasonable people, had asked for reasons, Harry did not write to anyone. Harry did not have the address. Harry had, on the morning the letter came, been locked in his cupboard by Uncle Vernon, who had decided the whole business was some elaborate prank and that the best defense against magic was to refuse to feed it. So it was pure luck, or something wearing the costume of luck, that the man came to Privet Drive on his way from the Grangers, on the theory that he might as well collect both halves of his problem in one afternoon. His name was Alcyon Nix, and he was a solicitor. Or something adjacent to a solicitor. The wizarding word, Hermione would learn, was steward, and the House of Black had employed men like him for 400 years to do the things that a family of that kind needed done and did not wish to be seen doing. He was tall and gray and dressed in a coat that had been fashionable at some point before anyone living was born. And he moved through the world like it owed him an apology he was too well-bred to demand. When Petunia opened the door to him, she took one look, went white, and said, "You people," in a voice like a slammed drawer. "Mrs. Dursley." He inclined his head a precise half-inch. "I represent the estate of a family your late sister married into the fringe of. I require 20 minutes of the boy's time, after which I will trouble you no further today." He let the today sit there, small and cold, until Petunia understood it was a promise of more, and not less. They put him in the front room, on the good sofa, which no one was allowed to sit on. Harry was led out of the cupboard to face him, blinking in the light, and Nix looked at him for a long moment with an expression Harry could not read and would not be able to read for years. The look of a man doing sums. "You are very like your grandmother," Nix said at last, "which is inconvenient for everyone, including you." He set a document case on his knees. He did not open it. "Do you know why I'm here?" "An owl brought a letter." Harry stayed standing. Something told him not to sit down in front of this man. It had a girl's name on it, and then it had mine. "Yes." Nix folded his long hands. "Sit, Mr. Potter. This will take a little while, and it will be easier for both of us if you are not braced to bolt." Harry sat on the edge of the armchair, ready to bolt. He got the same speech Hermione had got 2 hours earlier, though he did not know it, and Nix gave it the same way twice. Flat, exact, without a scrap of warmth, because he had decided that these two children were owed the truth, and that dressing the truth in kindness was a kind of lie he did not have the stomach for. The House of Black, Nix said, was one of the oldest wizarding families in Britain. It had also been, for most of its history, one of the worst, proud, cruel, obsessed with blood and lineage, its motto, "Toshures pure," stitched into its tapestries and burned into its howitzer. Harry did not need to understand the whole of it. He needed to understand one instrument of it. Centuries ago, the house had begun sealing betrothals into its own magic. Not promises, not arrangements, but bindings, drawn from the family's oldest and deepest power and locked to the house itself. A sealed compact could not be argued with. It could not be voided by a change of heart, a change of fortune, or the death of the person who made it. It answered to the magic that made it, and to nothing else. "And someone made one," Harry said. "With me, not with you." Nix's voice did not change, but his eyes did, a fraction. "For you. You had no more say in it than the ink did. That is rather the point of a thing like this. It does not require your consent, because it was not asked for your consent. It was asked when you had no self to consent with. You were named into it as an infant. So was the girl. Why? It came out harder than Harry meant. Why me? I'm nobody. I sleep in a cupboard. Why would some ancient family? Because your godfather is Sirius Black." Nix said it and then watched, with the detachment of a man dropping a stone down a well to hear how deep it goes, as the name landed on a boy who had never heard it. Your parents, before they died, named him yours. He is, whatever else he is, the last true line heir of the House of Black, and by the House's own law that makes you something the House has a word for, and the ordinary world does not. It makes you claimable. At a very long time ago. Before you, before your parents, before the war, an ancestor of yours and an ancestor of the Granger girls signed a compact and sealed it into the house, to be filled by the first eligible children of each line to come of age together. He paused. You and Miss Granger are those children. The magic found you the way water finds the low ground. It did not care who you were. It cared what you were. There is a difference, and you will spend a good deal of your life learning it. Harry was quiet. In the kitchen, he could hear Petunia running the tap very hard, the way she did when she wanted to drown out a conversation she was straining to hear. "Can it be undone?" he asked. By the house's magic, in principle. By you, no. Nix opened the case at last and drew out a single sheet. Old vellum, soft as cloth, covered in a script that seemed to move when Harry didn't look at it directly. This is a copy. The original is bound into the family and cannot leave it. But you should see the shape of the thing you're carrying. He laid it on the coffee table between them, turned so Harry could read it, and for the first time Harry saw the compact whole. It was not a contract. That was the thing that frightened him, later, when he had learned enough to be frightened by the right things. A contract was words, and words could be broken because people made them, and people were weak. This was not words. Under the writing, drawn in lines so fine they might have been cracks in the vellum itself, there was a diagram. 2 points, and a curve joining them, and around the curve a lattice of smaller curves, and around those receding more until the eye lost them in the grain of the page. It looked like a map of something enormous seen from very far away. It looked like the way the sky looks when you finally get far enough from the city to see how much of it there is. What is that? Harry whispered. That, said Nix, is the binding. The words are for lawyers. The diagram is the truth. The House of Black did not make promises. It made architecture. It reached into the part of magic that holds the world in its shape. The part that decides that a thing dropped will fall and a thing spoken will be heard, and it built you a room in it, you and the girl. You are, at this moment, standing in that room whether you can see its walls or not. He gathered the vellum back up, and the diagram seemed to fold itself away with something like reluctance. I tell you this not to frighten you. I tell you because you are going to spend a great deal of energy over the coming years trying to walk out of a room whose walls you have decided must be imaginary because you did not build them. I would rather you spend that energy on something useful. The walls are real. Learn where they are, then decide what to do inside them. Hermione had reached the same conclusion by a different road, which was that she had gone to the library, not the school library which she did not have yet, but the little one in her town, and then, when that failed her, the enormous and slightly frightening one in the city, where she had made her father drive her on a Saturday and had come home with photocopies and a headache and a face that meant she had found something and did not like it. She spread the photocopies on the kitchen table that evening, squared them off so their edges were parallel, and said to her parents in the voice she used when she had rehearsed a thing until it stopped shaking, "It's real, and it's old, and I can't get out of it. And neither can he. And pretending it isn't real is the single most dangerous thing we could do, because it doesn't care whether we believe in it." Her mother looked at the photocopies. "Darling, there's a case." Hermione put her finger on the top page, a passage of dense, wizarding legal print she had spent 2 hours parsing. In 1806, a boy named to a black compact refused it, ran away, married someone else. And the magic, it didn't punish him. That's what everyone gets wrong. It isn't a curse. It doesn't hurt you. She stopped and made herself say the part she had read 4 times to be sure. It just wouldn't let the other marriage take. The vows wouldn't seal. Nothing he built would hold because he was already built into something else and hadn't finished it. He spent 40 years trying to start a life, and every one of them slid off him like water off glass. He died. The account says he died unfinished. That's the word they use. Unfinished. The kitchen was very quiet. "I don't want to be unfinished," Hermione said, and it came out smaller than the rest. And her mother crossed the kitchen and put both arms around her, and Hermione let herself be held for exactly as long as she could stand, before the practical part of her stood up straight again inside her chest and said, "All right, that's enough. Now we solve it, so we don't fight the magic," her father said slowly. He was a dentist. He liked a plan. "We work with the terms of the thing. There must be terms. There are terms." Hermione pulled a fresh page to the front. This one she had copied out in her own careful hand because it mattered most. "The compact binds us. It doesn't marry us. Not yet, not until we're of age, and there's a whole procedure. What it does now, at our age, is smaller. It links us. We're meant to know each other. To be in each other's keeping, is the phrase. The house considers us kin from the moment the seal breaks, which means..." And here her voice did something complicated because she had arrived at the part that was both the most frightening and, though she would not have admitted it, the least, which means I have a boy, somewhere, who I've never met, who's stuck in this exactly as much as I am. And the one thing the account is completely clear about, in every single case going back 400 years, is that the pairs who hated each other were miserable and the pairs who managed to become something to each other were not. The magic doesn't make you love anybody. It just puts you in the room. What happens in the room is up to the people. Her father read the page upside down, which he was good at, from years of leaning over patience. "And you've decided." "I've decided I'd rather not be miserable for 40 years, Hermione said. "So I'm going to meet him, and I'm going to be reasonable, civil. And if he's a horrible boy, I'll be civil at him from a distance for the rest of my life. But I am not going to walk into this pretending the walls aren't there." She squared the pages again, though they were already square. That's the most dangerous thing you can do. Neither of her parents pointed out that she had said the thing about the walls twice now, in almost the same words, in the hope that repeating it might make her braver. Parents know when a child is building themselves a spine out loud. They met 3 weeks before term on neutral ground, which was Nix's idea and the only idea anyone had that all 4 adults could agree to. The ground was Diagon Alley, and specifically a tea shop halfway down it that had been serving the old families for 200 years and had a back room that could be paid to be private. Harry came with the Dursleys as far as the leaky cauldron and no further. Vernon had refused with a kind of grim triumph to set foot inside and had dropped Harry at the pub's door like a parcel he was glad to be rid of, and it was Nix who walked Harry through into the alley for the first time. Harry's plan, formed over 3 weeks of lying awake in the cupboard, was to be exactly as difficult as he could get away with. He had decided that the one thing nobody had let him do in 11 years was say no, and that he was going to say it now. To the magic, to the house, to the whole apparatus that had reached into his life and rearranged it without asking, and to the girl, if the girl turned out to be part of the apparatus. He was braced for a black. He had built her in his head out of everything Nix had said about the family. Proud, cold, obsessed with blood, looking at him like something the owl had brought in. He walked into the back room of the tea shop with his shoulders already up around his ears and his no already loaded, and he found a girl his own age sitting bolt upright at the table with a stack of books beside the teapot, mid-argument with a waiter about whether the shop's history claims could possibly be accurate, and she stopped and looked at him, and he saw in about half a second that she was as frightened as he was and had decided the same thing he had, to not show it, and had chosen the exact same disguise. Books. Facts. A wall of I know things thrown up against the fact of not knowing this. "You're late," Hermione said, which was not true, and they both knew it was not true, and it was the most human thing anyone had said to Harry in 3 weeks. "You're reading at a table," Harry said, "in a tea shop, about the tea shop. I'm verifying its claims." It's a tea shop, which is claiming to be 400 years old, which would make it older than the building it's in, which I can see from the brickwork it is not. So either the plaque is wrong, or the building was rebuilt around a preserved room, and if it's the second one, that's actually quite interesting and worth knowing. So, she closed the book. She had gone slightly pink. "Sit down. I've ordered you tea. I didn't know what you liked, so I ordered you the plain kind. You can put things in it." Harry sat down. It was not what he had planned. He had planned to stay standing, to keep the door at his back, to deliver his no from a position of readiness. Instead, he found himself sitting across from a girl who had ordered him tea because she didn't know what he liked, and the whole architecture of his 3 weeks of resentment discovered it had been built to keep out a black, and there was no black here. There was a girl with too many books and ink on her middle finger, and a very slightly wobbling chin that she was controlling by force of will, and Harry, who had spent his whole life reading the faces of people bigger than him for what they were about to do, read hers and found nothing there he needed to be afraid of, which made him angrier, not less. Because it would have been easier to hate her. "I don't want this," he said, once the adults had withdrawn to the far end of the room to pretend not to listen. Nix and the 2 Grangers and a 4th chair that stayed empty, that Harry would learn later had been set for Sirius and could not be filled for reasons that were their own long story. I want to be clear about that first, before anything else. I didn't ask for it, I don't want it, and if there were a way to end it, I'd take it in a heartbeat and I wouldn't feel bad. "Good," Hermione said. Harry blinked. "Good," Hermione said. Harry blinked. "Good." That's the correct response. She poured her own tea with a steadiness that was slightly overdone, the steadiness of someone showing you how steady they are. "I don't want it either. I want to be a witch, and I've read 4 books about it, and I'm going to be extremely good at it, and I did not plan on being attached to a stranger by a piece of 400-year-old magic I can't get out of. So we agree. It's a cage. Neither of us built it. We're both in it." She set the teapot down. "The question isn't whether we like it. The question is, what we do now that we're both standing in the same cage and shouting at the bars is a waste of everyone's time. So I made a list. You made a list. I make lists." She produced it. Of course she produced it. It was a single sheet folded once, and she unfolded it and turned it to face him the way Nix had turned the vellum, and Harry looked down at a girl's careful handwriting laying out, in numbered points, the terms of a truce with fate. 1. We are honest with each other. Always. The magic makes us kin. We might as well not lie inside it. 2. We help each other. We're stuck together, so being enemies is stupid. Being friends is optional. Being allies is not. 3. We keep looking for the way out. Both of us. Together. If there's a term or a clause or a case that undoes it, we find it, and we don't stop looking just because it's hard. 4. Nobody decides for us. Not the house, not the stewards, not the magic. Whatever this becomes, we choose it, or it doesn't count. Harry read it twice. The 4th point, most of all. Nobody decides for us. He thought about the cupboard and the tap running to drown out his life and 11 years of being moved around a house like furniture and something in his chest that had been clenched since the owl came unclenched by a single degree. Not because the cage was gone, but because for the first time someone had handed him the pen. "You forgot one," he said. Hermione's chin came up. "I did not forget. 5. Harry took the pen off the table before he could think better of it and wrote it under her foreign handwriting so much worse than hers that she made a small pained sound at the sight of it. "We're allowed to hate it. Both of us, out loud, to each other. We don't have to pretend it's all right." He turned it back to her. She read it. Her chin, which she had been holding so carefully still, gave up the fight for a second and did wobble, once. And she looked down fast and did not let him see it settle, and when she looked down fast and did not let him see it settle, and when she looked up again, she had it back under control. "Fine," she said. "5. That's actually a good one. A breath. You should put your name to it, the way the compact has our names, so it's ours and not the house's." They signed it, Harry Potter in his terrible hand, Hermione Granger in her careful one, and under it, because she insisted, the date. Because Hermione believed a thing without a date on it was only half real, and when the last stroke of her name was down, the strangest thing happened. The thing that neither of them mentioned to the adults then, or for a long time after. The paper grew warm. Not hot. Warm, the way a windowsill is warm where the sun has been sitting, and the warmth passed through Harry's hand where it rested on the page and up his arm and settled somewhere behind his ribs, and across the table, he saw Hermione's hand go still on her half of the paper. Saw her feel it too, saw her eyes come up to his with a question in them that neither of them had the vocabulary for yet. It was the binding. It had been quiet all afternoon, dormant, waiting the way the diagram had waited on the vellum. And they had, without meaning to, without knowing what they were doing, done the one thing 400 years of blacks had done in front of witnesses and stewards and lawyers, the thing the whole apparatus existed to make them do. They had chosen a term of it. Together. Freely. And the magic, which did not care who they were but cared very much what they did, had felt it and answered. The way a struck string answers the one beside it. Not much, a single degree of warmth. A note held for half a second and gone. But the House of Black kept records, and centuries later a steward reading them would find, dated in a child's careful hand, the first time in the compact's long history that the binding had been answered not with a vow, not with a signature demanded, but with a truce. And he would not know what to make of it because the house had never made a room for that. The rest of the afternoon was smaller things, which is how the important afternoons always are. Harry learned that Hermione had read the entire first-year curriculum and had opinions about the Transfiguration textbook. Hermione learned that Harry had grown up in a cupboard and said it the way you'd mention the weather and filed it, not in the band way, the pretending you don't care way, but in the real way, the way you tuck away a fact about someone that you are going to do something about later. Harry learned that Hermione's front teeth were slightly too big and that she covered her mouth when she laughed, and that she did not laugh easily, so that when he got one out of her by imitating the waiter who had come back to defend the tea shop's honor with a pamphlet, it felt like winning something. Hermione learned that Harry watched every exit in a room and that his hands went still and ready when a voice got loud. And she did not comment on it, but she moved the sugar bowl 6 inches to the left so it was no longer between him and the door, and she saw him notice her do it, and neither of them said anything. And that was the second term of the truce being kept without being spoken. Nix watched all of it from the far end of the room with his sums going behind his eyes. "They should hate each other," said Mr. Granger quietly beside him. "By everything you've told us, 2 children shoved into this. They should be at each other's throats." "Yes," said Nix. "They're not." "No." Nix was quiet for a moment. Down the room, the boy imitated the waiter again, and the girl covered her mouth with her hand. "That is the part I did not put in my report to the House, Mr. Granger, and I will ask you not to put it in yours. The House understands compulsion. It has 400 years of compulsion. It does not understand what those two are doing, and a thing the House of Black does not understand is a thing the House of Black will eventually try to break out of nothing more than the discomfort of not owning it." He turned from the children to the father. "You asked me 3 weeks ago whether your daughter was in danger. I told you no, because the magic will not harm her. That was true, and it was not the whole answer. The whole answer is that the magic will not harm her, but the family might, if she and that boy become something the family did not order, and they are becoming it very fast, and they do not even know they are doing it, and that..." He looked back down the room, and for just a moment the steward's face did a thing that had nothing of sums in it. "That is the most dangerous and the most valuable thing I have seen in 30 years of service. Watch them. Say nothing. And for the love of every old star that family swears by, do not tell them what they're doing. If they find out they're building something, they'll get self-conscious and stop, the way you stop being able to walk when you start thinking about your feet. Let them keep not knowing. It's the only way they'll get anywhere." Mr. Granger looked at his daughter, who was, at that moment, correcting Harry's grip on a teaspoon with the exasperated tenderness of someone who has already, without noticing, decided to keep him. "You're a strange sort of lawyer," he said. "I am a steward of the House of Black," said Nix. "There is no stranger sort of anything." Before they left, Nix did one more thing, and it was the thing Harry would remember longest, longer than the tea or the list or even the warmth in the paper. He called them both to the window at the back of the private room, where the evening was coming down over the crooked roofs, and he took from his coat a small instrument of brass and glass that unfolded in his hands like a puzzle box, learning to be a flower. When it had finished opening, it held, between 2 curved arms, a single point of light, not a flame. Nothing so warm as a fling, but a cold white pinprick that turns slowly on nothing, the way a planet turns. The house keeps one of these for every living compact, Nix said. It is called a witness glass. It does not spy on you. It cannot hear a word you say. It shows one thing only. He held it so both children could see. It shows the binding. There, that light. That is you two, as the deep magic sees you. Not your faces, not your names, the shape you make together in the part of the world that holds things in their places. Hermione leaned close, and her breath fogged the glass, and she wiped it clear with her sleeve without being asked. Because she could not bear a smudged lens. It's just one light, she said. There should be two of us. There were two of you this morning. Nix's voice was very even. There was a light for the Potter line and a light for the Granger line, and they sat in the glass an inch apart, the way they have sat since inch you were named, waiting. I watched them from here as you signed your foolish little treaty. He turned the glass a fraction, and deep inside the point of light there was a texture, a graining as though it were made of two threads wound so tightly that only the windings showed. An hour ago they became one light. That is what the warmth in the paper was. You will not do that again by accident, and you cannot undo it by wanting to. The house has records 4 centuries deep, and no compact pair has ever pulled the two lights apart once they joined. But, and here the sharpness came into him, the lawyer, the man of the house, hear me, both of you. Because this is the part that will decide whether you live quiet lives or interesting ones. There are people in my family for whom that single light is a catastrophe. Harry looked up. Why would anyone care about a light in a box? Because of what it means about the succession. Nix folded the glass closed, and the point of light did not go out so much as withdraw, the way a star withdraws at dawn without ever having moved. You are your godfather's claimed heir, Mr. Potter, which places you in the line of the house whether the house is glad of it or not, and much of the house is not glad of it, because you are a half-blood raised by muggles and Miss Granger is muggle-born entirely. And the House of Black has spent 400 years being very, very particular about blood. A compact filled cleanly, a light joined and settled, is a compact that cannot be reassigned. It closes a door. There are cousins of mine who wanted that door left open, who wanted the Potter claim to fail so the heirship might fall elsewhere, to a nephew, to a grandson, to some pure and biddable child of their own choosing. This afternoon, without knowing it, you shut the door in their faces. You made yourselves permanent. He looked from one to the other, gray and grave. They will not forgive it quickly. I am not telling you to be frightened. I am telling you to be awake. The magic that binds you will not harm you. The living cannot say the same of themselves. Do you understand? No, said Harry honestly, because it was the first term of the treaty and he was not going to break it in front of the man who'd made the treaty possible. Not all of it, but I understand enough to know you're telling us we've got enemies now, because of a light that we didn't even mean to make. Yes, something in Nix eased fractionally, the way a teacher eases when a slow answer turns out to be the right one. That is precisely enough to be going on with. The rest you will learn. You have 7 years and a great many books, and Miss Granger has already read 4 of them. He inclined his head that same precise half-inch he'd given Petunia at the door, but it landed differently now, and both children felt it land differently, not dismissal, something closer to respect, rationed out in the smallest coin the man possessed. The house will watch that glass, so will its enemies, by ways I cannot close. Every time the light brightens, they will know you have grown closer, and every time it dims, they will hope. My advice, and I give advice to no one, so mark that I am giving it, is to stop caring what the glass says. Live inside the room. Let them read the ceiling. Hermione had gone quiet in the particular way that meant she was frightened and refusing to be. She said, You keep calling it a room. The magic. The binding. You called it a room this morning to Harry, he told me. Why a room? Nix was silent for a moment. Outside, the last of the shops were shuttering, and a lamplighter's charm went down the alley touching the lamps awake one by one. A line of small gold answers to the dark. Because that is the kindest true thing I know how to say about it. He said at last. A cage has bars and a door someone else holds the key to. That is what your treaty called it, and your treaty is a child's document and you will both outgrow it. A room? He gestured, once, at the whole crooked golden alley, at the joined light folded away in his coat, at the two of them standing shoulder to shoulder at the window without having noticed they drifted together. A room you can furnish. You can decide where the light falls in it. You can decide who else you let through the door. The walls will not move for you. That is true. That is the hard truth of a sealed compact and I will not soften it. But everything inside the walls is yours to arrange, and most people, Ms. Granger, most people who are not bound by anything at all, never once in their whole free lives arrange the room they're standing in. They let the world set it out for them and call that freedom. He opened the door for them, and the evening came in cool off the cobbles. You two have been handed the walls early and cruelly and without your leave. I am sorry for it. I have been sorry for it since I carried your names in that envelope, but do not mistake the walls for the room. Go and furnish it. That is the only revenge on this family that has ever worked, and I have watched a great many people try the others. They filed out past him into the lamplight, and neither of them fully understood him. And both of them would understand him more with every year, until one day, grown and sure and standing in a room they had built together out of nothing but choices. They would understand him completely and wish he had lived to see it. They said goodbye on the cobbles outside in the long gold light of the alley at closing, with the shop signs creaking and an owl going over low and heavy toward the post office. "So," Hermione said. She had her books in a bag now, and she was holding the bag with both arms across her chest like a shield, and Harry recognized the pose because he did it too. The arms crossed over something precious pose of a person who has learned not to leave the soft parts exposed. September. The train. We'll both be there. On the same train. Going to the same place. For 7 years. 7 years, Harry said. The number was enormous. 3 weeks ago the number would have been a sentence. Now it was just a number, sitting there, with a person attached to it. "I've decided something," she said in her rehearsed voice, the spine-out-loud voice. "I've decided I'm not going to be nice to you. Because nice is what you are to strangers. And we're not strangers, we're whatever we are. Cage mates. So I'm going to be honest with you instead. Which is better and much rarer. And I'm going to tell you when you're wrong. Which you will be a lot. Because you haven't read anything. And you're going to do the same to me, and you'd better. Because everyone else is either scared of me or thinks I'm scary. And either way, nobody tells me the truth, and I..." She stopped. The spine wavered. "I'd like it if someone told me the truth. That's the only thing I actually want out of this horrible, unfair thing that's happened to us. One person who has to be honest with me because we wrote it down and made it a rule." Harry looked at her. The gold light was in her hair and she was gripping her books like a life raft, and she had just told him in the most roundabout and heavily armored way possible that she was lonely, that she'd always been lonely, that she'd always been lonely, that she was clever in the specific way that makes people keep their distance, and that the cage they'd both been thrown into was, for her, the first time anyone had ever been forced to stay in the room with her long enough to find out she was worth staying for. He did not have the words for any of that. He was 11. But he understood it, because it was his own loneliness wearing a different coat, and he answered it the only way he knew how, which was to be honest, immediately as a demonstration. "I think you talk too much," he said. "And I think you're going to be the smartest person I've ever met, and those are both true at the same time, and I'm not going to pretend the first one isn't so you feel better, because that was the deal." Hermione stared at him, and then she laughed. The real one, the one with her hand over her mouth. And the sound of it went up between the old shop fronts and startled the owl into a change of course, and something that had been braced in both of them since the morning the letters came. Let go. Just a little. Just enough. "That," she said when she got her hand down, "was almost perfect, and you ruined it by being right about the second part and rude about the first, which is exactly what I asked for, so I can't even complain. You'll find a way. I always find a way." She hitched the bag higher. Down the cobbles, Nyx was waiting with a patience that was its own kind of pressure, and her parents were waiting past him, and the day was ending, and the cage was still a cage, and neither of them had forgotten that for a single second. Because the fifth term of the truce was that they didn't have to pretend. Harry. His name in her mouth for the first time tried out, careful, like a word in a new language. "I still hate it, the compact. I want you to know that hasn't changed." "I know. Me too." "Good." She nodded, once. Hard, the way she did everything. "As long as we both still hate it. That's how I'll know it's real. Whatever. Whatever this turns into. As long as we're choosing it over the top of hating it and not because the magic made us. That's the only way it counts." She had said, without knowing it, the thing that would take them 7 years to earn. Harry didn't understand it yet. He only knew that when she turned to go, and the gold light swung across her, he did not want the afternoon to end, and that this was a strange thing to feel about a person he had walked in prepared to refuse, and that he was not going to examine it too closely in case examining it made it stop. The way you stop being able to walk when you think about your feet. "See you in September," he said. September, she agreed, and went to her parents and did not look back because she had decided in advance that she wouldn't, and it cost her something, and Harry saw exactly what it cost and filed it in the real way and thought 7 years. And for the first time, the number did not feel like a sentence. It felt like a length of rope thrown across a gap. He didn't know yet whether he was the one falling or the one holding the other end. He would find out that it was going to be both over and over for the rest of their lives. Above them, indifferent, ancient, patient. The binding held its single note and waited to see what the children would make of the room. Chapter 1. And Chapter 2. What the cold wanted by November, they had a system, and the system was that they did not sit together. It had been Hermione's idea, and Harry had agreed to it too quickly, which should have told them both something, but they were 11 and 11-year-olds, are not archaeologists of their own motives. The reasoning was sound on the surface. They had come to Hogwarts sorted into different tables. Harry to Gryffindor, where the hat had barely touched his head, and Hermione to Gryffindor too. After a full 4 minutes of the hat arguing with itself, which she took as a personal compliment and everyone else took as a warning. So at least they shared a house. But a compact was a private thing, a black thing, a thing that would have to be explained, and neither of them wanted to spend their first term at the one place that had ever felt like it might become theirs by explaining that they were engaged. So they were, in public, 2 Gryffindors who happened to be in the same year. Hermione sat at the front of every class with her hand in the air. Harry sat at the back and learned the castle's exits the way he'd learned the Dursleys. They passed in corridors and did not stop. They both privately agreed, working beautifully. It was working so beautifully that they met in the library 4 evenings a week to keep looking for the way out, which was point 3 of the treaty, and told themselves this did not count as sitting together because it was research. "It's not the same," Hermione said, the first time Harry pointed it out. "This is work. We're the only 2 people at this table and you saved me the good chair. The good chair has back support. You slouch. You'll ruin your spine by 30, and then where will we be?" She turned a page of the enormous book she had requisitioned from the restricted section by means Harry had decided not to ask about. "Sit in the good chair and stop talking. I found something." She had found a great many somethings by November, and all of them had been dead ends, and Harry had watched her take each dead end personally, as an insult, as a thing the universe had done specifically to spite her. This one was a treatise on the dissolution of magical contracts, and it had told her, after 4 hours, that a sealed black compact could be dissolved by exactly 3 means: the extinction of one of the 2 lines, which was not on the table, a formal renunciation performed by the acting head of the House of Black, who was Sirius, who was a complication, a long story, a chair that stayed empty, or the mutual, witnessed, freely given release of both bound parties, performed as an adult, before the family magic, in a rite that canaste guy. "So, there is a way out," Harry said, reading it over her shoulder. He'd got up to read it over her shoulder. The good chair had back support, but the words were upside down from it. "There's a way out when we're 17. Hermione underlined the passage in the air with her finger, not touching the ancient page, because she respected books more than she respected most people. "If we both still want it. If we both stand up in front of the magic and say, freely, no. That's the 3rd way, mutual release." She was quiet for a second. It's fair, isn't it? It's the fairest of the 3. It gives it back to us. When we're old enough to mean it, we get to decide." "You sound disappointed." "I'm not disappointed." She closed the book with a snap that was slightly too hard. "I wanted a clause, a loophole, something clever. I wanted to win. And instead the answer is just, wait 6 years and choose. There's nothing clever about waiting. Anyone can wait." She stacked the book on the return pile with more force than a 400-year-old book deserved. "I don't like problems whose only solution is patience. Patience isn't a solution. It's just the absence of one, dressed up." Harry, who had spent 11 years being patient in a cupboard because there was no other solution, opened his mouth to tell her that patience was in fact the hardest thing in the world, and that people who found it easy to be clever usually found it easy precisely because they'd never had to be patient. He didn't. It was too true and too much, and it would have told her something about him he wasn't ready to have known. Instead he said, "So we've got 6 years to find a better answer." "That's ages. That's basically forever." "It's not forever, it's exactly 6 years. I could tell you the days, Hermione. But I take your point." She almost smiled. She was getting better at almost smiling at him, which was its own slow research project that neither of them had written down. 6 years. Fine. We keep the file open. She'd started calling it the file. Their collected findings on the compact, and she kept it in a folder with a lock charm she taught herself out of a book, and Harry found the whole apparatus of it deeply reassuring in a way he couldn't have explained, because it meant someone was in charge of the thing that had happened to them, and that someone was very organized, and on his side, which was the moment the lamps went out. Not all of them. That was the wrong part, the part that made the back of Harry's neck go tight before his mind had caught up. If all the lamps had gone out, it would have been a fault, a draft, a first year with more enthusiasm than sense practicing a spell. But it was not all of them. It was a line of them, the lamps down the central aisle of the library, one after another, guttering out in sequence, and the sequence was coming toward them, and it was coming slowly, and with each lamp that died the temperature dropped, so that by the 3rd one Harry could see his own breath, and by the 5th, the ink in Hermione's open bottle had a skin of frost across it. "Harry." Her voice had gone flat and careful, the voice of a person doing sums very fast under fear. "That's not a draft. I know. The cold's arriving before the dark. That's backwards. Cold comes from the dark doesn't." She stopped. Another lamp died. The frost climbed another foot of the table. "Something's putting the lamps out to make room for itself. It wants the dark. It's Harry. It's clearing a path." He was already moving, already had a hand on her sleeve, already steering them both up and back from the table toward the shelves, because whatever it was coming down the open aisle. And the open aisle was the last place he wanted to be. 11 years of reading rooms telling him get out of the open, get where it can only come at you from one side. The library was vast and black now beyond the little island of the 2 lamps still burning over their table, and in the blackness something moved with a sound like a long, slow inhalation, like the whole room breathing in, and where it passed the air did not thicken. That was the wrong word, the word people used, and it was wrong. The air went thin. That was the horror of it. The air went thin and hungry, the cold not a thing arriving but a thing being taken, warmth and light and the ordinary friendly density of the world all being drawn out through a hole in the dark toward whatever stood at its center. Wands out. Hermione breathed. We've done light. We've both done light, Professor Flitwick. First week. Lumos, Harry said, and his wand lit, and Hermione's lit beside it, two small stubborn stars, and in their doubled light they saw it for the first time. And Harry understood that all the reading rooms in the world had not prepared him for this, because this was not a person and did not come at you from a side. It came from everywhere the light wasn't. It was tall, and it was wrong, and Harry's eyes kept trying to give it a shape and failing the way your eye fails at the bottom of deep water. It wore something that had once been a cloak, and was now more like a wound in the air with cloth remembered around it. Where a face should have been there was a hood, and under the hood there was nothing his mind would agree to see. And it was cold. Cold the way space is cold. Cold the way the gap between two stars is cold. An old, indifferent, enormous cold that had been traveling toward this table since before the table was a tree. And as it came, the two lamps over their heads guttered, and Harry felt the thin place open in his own chest, felt the cold reach past his skin and his ribs and take hold of something under them. And the something it took hold of was every bad thing that had ever happened to him. The cupboard. The dark of the cupboard and the light coming under the door and a thin line and the sound of the lock. Aunt Petunia's face. A green flash he did not remember and had never told anyone about because it lived below the place memories live, and a woman's voice screaming a word that might have been his name, and the cold pulled on all of it, drew it up out of the deep water where he kept it, held it up to the thin light and made him look, and his knees went, and his wand hand dropped, and the little star of his Lumos began to die. Herod. Hermione's voice, and then Hermione's hand, and this was the thing. This was the exact thing. This was the moment the whole rest of their lives turned on and neither of them would understand it, until years later. Her hand closed over his falling wand hand, over his fingers where they'd gone slack around the wood, and she did not take his wand, and she did not hold him up. She wrapped her hand around his hand around the wand, and she pushed his light back on. Physically, she forced his fingers to grip, and she forced his arm to lift, and she put her mouth next to his ear, and she said, not gently, not kindly, in the fierce, flat, furious voice of a girl who had decided that the universe was not allowed to have him, "You do not get to fall down. We wrote it down. You do not get to fall down and leave me in the dark with this thing. That's not the deal. The deal is we're honest and we help each other, and I am helping you, so you help me back. Right now, light, Harry, light, Harry, light." And her Lumos was blazing, both their wands blazing under her doubled grip, and the cold hit her too. He felt it hit her, felt her hand jerk against his, as whatever the thing pulled out of her rose up to be looked at, and later, much later, he would learn what it was, would learn that even Hermione Granger, who seemed to fear nothing, had a dark under her dark. A memory of a small girl at the edge of a playground with a book, always with a book, always at the edge, never once asked to come in. And the cold found that and pole darted for 1 second, and Harry, whose light she had just refused to let go out, did the only thing that made sense. The thing that 400 years of blacks and their calculating stewards had never once managed to compel and could not have compelled, if they'd tried. He turned his hand over inside hers, so that instead of her holding his hand up, it was the two of them holding each other's, palm to palm around two wands and two lights. And he said her name back to her, the way she'd said his. Hard a rope thrown, "Hermione, you don't get to fall down either." Helbay, and the two lights, which had been two, became one. He would try to describe it to her afterward, and fail, and she would try to describe it to him and fail, and they would decide, in the end, that it could not be described to anyone who hadn't been holding the other end, and they would stop trying, and that shared failure would become one more thing that was only theirs. But what happened was this. When their hands closed the circle and their two Lumos lights touched and held, the binding woke. Not gently. The warmth that had passed through the treaty paper in diagonally had been a note struck once and let fade. This was the whole instrument, the single-joined light in Nix's witness glass, 200 miles south in a house that did not exist, flared so bright that a portrait woke and a clock stopped. But Harry and Hermione did not see that. They only felt what it was the far end of, which was heat. Real heat. It came up out of the place under their ribs where the cold had been reaching, and it met the cold head on, and it was not a spell either of them had cast because neither of them knew it. It was older than spells. It was the deep magic that held the world in its shape, reaching back up through the little room it had built for them and pouring warmth into two children who had, at last, of their own free and terrified will, chosen to be one light instead of two. The thing in the dark stopped. It was not afraid. Harry understood later that it could not be afraid, that fear was one of the warm things it had no room for. But it was confused, in the way a river is confused by a stone. It had come for cold and dark and the slow drawing out of everything warm, and it had found, at the center of the table, it meant to empty. A heat it had no category for. A heat that was not one person's stubborn spark to be pulled out and swallowed, but two people's, wound together, each one holding the others up. A fire that could not be drowned because every time the cold pulled warmth from one of them, the other one poured it back. It reached. The warmth met the reach and turned it. It reached again, turned again, and the cold, being ancient and patient but not, in the end, clever, did the thing that ancient, patient, unclever things do when they meet a problem they have no shade for. It withdrew. Up the aisle, lamp by lamp, and the lamps came back on behind it one by one as it went, gold answering the dark, until the far door of the library sighed open on nothing and closed on nothing, and the cold was gone, and the two of them were kneeling on the library floor, with hands locked together around bound fate or asleep. For a while neither of them let go. Is it? Harry's voice came out cracked. Is it gone? It's gone. Hermione was shaking. He could feel it through their joined hands, a fine hard tremor, and he understood that she had been more frightened than he was and had refused it harder, which was somehow the most Hermione thing he had ever felt. The lamps are on. It's gone. And then, because she was Hermione and the fear had to go somewhere and it always went the same place, that was a Dementor. That was a real Dementor in the school, in the library, and Dementors are guards. They're supposed to be at Azkaban. They don't leave. They can't leave. Someone would have to. Harry! Someone brought that here. Someone put out the lamps and let that thing into a school full of children and pointed it down the aisle at our table. At our table. He heard himself say it. He heard what it meant. Not at a table. At ours. Hermione, the file. Nick said. He said the family. He said there were people who wanted the compact to fail. Her hand tightened on his. Neither of them had let go. It did not occur to either of them to let go. A compact fails, she said slowly, working it out aloud. The fear turning into thinking the way it always did with her, thinking being the only place she had ever been safe. If one of the lines ends, if one of us, Harry, if one of us died before became of age, the compact would break and the airship would come open again, and Nick said there were cousins who wanted it open. She stopped. She looked at him in the returned lamplight and her face did something he had never seen it do. All the cleverness falling off it at once, leaving underneath just a girl who had understood, for the first time in her short, organized, well-defended life, that there were people in the world who would prefer her to be dead. They didn't send it to scare us, or to hurt the school. They sent it for one of us. It doesn't matter which. Either one of us dead and the doors open again. Then they've made a mistake, Harry said, and he did not know where the words came from. Only that they were true the second they were out, true the way the fifth term of the treaty had been true, because they sent one thing. To kill one of us. And there aren't. Hermione, there aren't two of us to kill. There's one light. You made it one light. Just now. On purpose. So they can't get one of us. They'd have to get both of us at once, and we're going to make very sure that's a lot harder than putting out some lamps. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she did the thing with her hand where she made it grip his harder before she let go, so that the letting go was a decision and not a retreat, and she got to her feet, and she pulled him up after her, and she was still shaking and she was already reaching for her folder with her other hand, and Harry understood that Hermione Granger had just declared war, and that she was going to fight it with research, and that God help whoever had sent the cold. They did not tell a teacher. This was, in retrospect, a mistake, and it was the kind of mistake that 11-year-olds make, and 11-year-olds who have both spent their childhoods learning that adults do not save you make with total conviction. Hermione's argument, delivered at speed in the corridor outside the library while the castle slept, ran roughly. If they told the teacher would want to know why a Dementor had come for 2 first years, and answering that meant explaining the compact, which meant the whole school knowing they were bound, which meant the enemies knowing exactly how close they'd come and knowing to try again, differently, better. Harry's argument was shorter and ran roughly. No adult has ever helped me, and I'm not going to start helping now. They arrived at the same place from different childhoods, which was becoming a pattern, and they made a pact inside the pact. They would find out who had done it themselves, and they would tell exactly one adult, and it would be Nyx, because Nyx was the only one who already knew what they were and the only one whose whole existence was keeping the house's secrets, and a man like that could be trusted with a secret precisely because he had no use for it except to keep it. The letter to Nyx took them 2 hours to write because Hermione revised it 11 times. It said, in the end, very little that an interceptor could use and everything Nyx needed. A visitor came down the aisle tonight and put out the lamps. It knew our table. We are both well. We think the door someone wanted open has been tried. We are looking. Tell us what you know. She signed it with both their names in the bracket, the way the compact did, and Harry saw her do it, and saw that it was deliberate, that she was telling Nyx we are one light now. We did it, in the only code they had, and he took the pen and added under it, in his terrible hand, one line of his own. They only sent enough cold for one of us. And Hermione read it and went still and said, that's Harry, that's actually good. That tells him the most important thing in the fewest words. That's the whole strategic situation in one sentence. And Harry, who had never in his life been told that a thing he'd written was good, went red to the ears and pretended to be looking for the owl. Nyx's reply came in 3 days and was shorter than their letter. It said, I know the visitor's keeper. I do not yet know the hand that sent it, but I know the family it flew for. And it is the branch I warned you of. Say nothing. Change nothing anyone can see. Sit apart as you have been. Meet as you have been. Let the glass tell them you are 2 lights that happen to share a library, and let them believe the visitor merely failed to find its mark. They will try again only when they are sure the first attempt went unnoticed. So we make certain it appears unnoticed, and we choose the ground of the second attempt ourselves. And then, at the bottom, in a different ink, as though he had put the letter down and picked it up again and could not quite stop himself. You joined the light under attack, with no steward and no right and no one telling you how. In 400 years that has happened twice. Both those pairs are in the histories. Be careful, children. You are becoming the sort of thing the house remembers. Hermione read that last part aloud in the library and then read it again silently, and then folded the letter into her folder with a lock charm and said nothing for a full minute, which for Hermione was a kind of shout. Twice in 400 years, she said at last. We joined the light under attack. Twice in 400 years. Harry, do you understand what that? She stopped herself. She'd caught the edge of the band thing, the making it conscious thing, the thinking about your feet thing, and she stepped back from it deliberately, and Harry saw her do it, and loved her for it a little, in the entirely unconscious and unexamined way that 11-year-olds love the person who is becoming their whole world. Never mind. It doesn't matter that we're rare. It matters that we're targets. Let's do what he says. Sit apart, meet as we've been, and find the hand. She pulled a fresh sheet toward her and uncapped her pen and wrote, at the top, in her careful, furious hand, Suspects, and underlined it twice, and Harry pulled the good chair around to her side of the table so he could see the list as it grew. And this time, she did not tell him he'd ruin his spine. Here is what changed, in the weeks after the cold came, and it changed so gradually that neither of them clocked it until it was done, which is the only way the real changes ever come. They kept sitting apart. That was true. In the Great Hall, in Charms, in the corridors, they were two Gryffindors who happened to share a year, and the witness glass in the south showed watchers exactly what they wanted it to show, which was two separate lights that met sometimes over books and parted again. But the sitting apart had been, in September, a wall, a thing they did to keep the world out of the private awful fact of the compact. And by December, the sitting apart had quietly, without permission, become a game. A code, a private country with a population of 2. Harry would catch Hermione's eye across the hall while some prefect droned about corridor rules and flick his gaze at the exits, 1, 2, 3, the old habit, and Hermione would flick hers to the same exits and then back to him with an eyebrow raised that said, "And what precisely are you planning to escape from? The pumpkin juice?" And he would have to look at his plate to not laugh. She would put her hand up in transfiguration and give an answer so complete that Professor McGonagall paused, and Harry, 3 rows back, would catch the exact half-second where Hermione's face lit with the pleasure of being right, and then clamp down on it because showing that you loved being right, and then clamp down on it because showing that you loved being right was social death, and he was the only person in the room who saw both halves, the light and the clamp, and he found he collected them. He couldn't have said why. He collected the moments where Hermione Granger's guard slipped, the way she'd once in Diagon Alley, moved a sugar bowl 6 inches to leave his exit clear, and she was collecting his. He didn't know that yet. He would find out on a night still weeks away, when the second attempt came, that Hermione Granger had spent the whole autumn quietly learning him. Which corridors made his shoulders come up, which teachers he trusted and which he watched. The fact that he gave his food away to a smaller boy who never noticed he was doing it. The fact that he flinched at raised voices and covered the flinch by getting very still. Which was worse, she had catalogued all of it. She had not written it in the folder with the lock charm. She had written it somewhere with a much better lock than any charm, and she was keeping it. The way he was keeping her slipped guards, and neither of them had told the other, and the not telling was becoming, itself, the most eloquent thing between them. The treaty had 5 terms. They both still hated the compact. They said so, out loud at least once a week, per term 5, usually Hermione, usually while glaring at some new dead end of the file. But somewhere in the cold of that November, without a right, without a steward, without anyone's leave, a 6th term had written itself that was not on the paper and never would be. And it was this, that the cage they had both been thrown into had become the only place either of them had ever been fully seen, and that this was a terrible thing to owe to a cage, and that they were beginning, very slowly and against their own furious wills, to stop being able to tell the difference between the cage and the country they were building inside it. Nix had called it furnishing the room. Neither of them would have used those words. But when the second attempt came, and it came in February, on the coldest night of the year, on a moving staircase with no lamps at all, they would go into it already holding hands before either of them reached for the other, because their hands had learned the way in the dark of the library and had not forgotten. And that, more than any joined light in any glass, was the thing their enemies had failed to understand when they sent one measure of cold for what they still thought were 2 separate children. But that was February, and this was still December, and December ended with a thing that mattered more than the cold. Though it made no noise and endangered no one and would never be in any of the house's histories. It was the last night before the holidays. The hall had emptied by degrees, the tables cleared, the enchanted ceiling gone to a deep still winter black scattered with the false stars that were, Hermione had established, a very good likeness of the real ones, and the 2 of them were the last first years still down in the common room because Harry was not going home. There was no home to go to that wanted him, and the castle would keep him over Christmas and he had been trying not to mind, and Hermione was going home in the morning, and she had found out that afternoon that he wasn't. She had not made a fuss. That was the thing he would remember. A different person would have made a fuss, would have said, "Oh, Harry, that's awful," would have pitied him, and pity was the one thing he could not have borne from her because pity meant she'd stop seeing him as an equal and started seeing him as a case, and the whole unspoken foundation of the country they were building was that they were equals. That she told him when he was wrong, and he told her when she talked too much, that neither of them was the other's project. So she did not pity him, she did something else. She sat down next to him on the hearthrug, close enough that their shoulders touched, which they never did in public and had never once done here, and she took a small parcel out of her bag and put it in his lap without ceremony and said, "It's early. It's for tomorrow really, but I won't be here tomorrow, so." It was a book. Of course it was a book. It was a slim old second-hand book called Quidditch Through the Ages, and he knew the second he opened it that she had chosen it because it was the one thing he'd shown pure, uncomplicated joy about all term. The flying, the one place in the whole magical world where he wasn't the strange famous orphan with the cupboard behind him, but just a person who was, it turned out, extraordinary it's something. And had she had me if she cries Quidditch from cloud charged at all, but the actual all tell him because he didn't have anything for her. He said so. He said it fast and awful. "I didn't. Hermione, I didn't get you." And she cut him off, not unkindly, in the flat, sure voice she used for facts. "You gave the file a good idea in October, and you added the 5th term to the treaty, and you told me I talk too much when everyone else just endures it and hopes I'll stop." She was looking at the fire, not at him, which was how she said the things that cost her. "I don't want a present. I've got presents. My parents give me presents. I've never in my whole life had someone who tell me the truth and stay anyway." A beat. The fire cracked. "You're going to be alone here for 2 weeks, and I didn't want you to be alone with nothing. That's all. It's not a big thing. Read the book. It's about flying. You like flying." Harry looked at the book, and then at the side of her face, lit orange by the fire, and he understood that she had just handed him, wrapped in an old Quidditch manual, the whole enormous fact of her loneliness and her choosing him out of it, and that if he said any of that out loud she would get up and leave, because Hermione Granger could give the truth all day long but could only bear to receive it sideways, in code, the way she'd received the 5th term and the sugar bowl. So he didn't say any of it. He said, "I'm going to read it twice, and then when you get back, I'm going to know more about Quidditch than you, and it's going to drive you insane." And Hermione laughed, the real one, hand over her mouth, in the empty firelit common room where no watcher's glass could see, and leaned for 1 second, the smallest possible amount, so that her head touched his shoulder and then didn't, so quick he might have imagined it if his whole nervous system hadn't lit up like a lumos, and stayed lit for an hour after she'd gone up to bed. And they sat there while the fire burned down, not talking, 2 children who had been thrown into a cage by a magic 400 years old, and a family that wanted at least one of them dead, and who had, in the dark of a library and the light of a hearth, begun without meaning to and against everything they'd sworn to build something the House of Black had no word for, and its enemies had fatally underestimated. Not a compact, not a binding, not 2 lights that happened to share a room. A friendship, the dangerous, chosen, unorderable kind. The kind you'd walk down a lightless staircase into the cold to keep. The kind that changes what the cold is able to do. January was for hunting, and they hunted the way they did everything, which was that Hermione narrowed and Harry noticed. They could not go to the source. The source was 200 miles south in a family they weren't supposed to know they'd been born into, so they worked the only end they had, which was the how. A Dementor did not walk into a castle by itself. Someone had to have brought it or called it or made a door for it, and doors leave frames. Hermione spent a fortnight in the restricted section reconstructing, from 3 separate treatises and a great deal of crossing out exactly what it took, to lead a Dementor off its leash at Azkaban and point at a target, and the answer she arrived at was a small cold horror. It took a token, a personal thing belonging to the intended prey, saturated with them, so the creature had something to hunt by. The cold had come down the library aisle straight to their table because something on that table, or near it, had been theirs. "So somebody in this castle got close enough to one of us to take something," Hermione said in the flat voice, laying it out on the folder pages. "A hair, a dropped quill, a page out of a book we'd handled, and passed it south, which means the hand isn't only in the family, Harry. The hand has a finger here. In the school, someone near us, someone we'd never suspect, because Cassiopeia, whoever it is, wouldn't use anyone we'd suspect." She looked up. "That's your part. I can tell you what they did. I can't tell you who's got a face friendly enough to get near us and cold enough to do this. You read people. Who's been too kind? Who's been closer than they've earned?" And Harry, who had spent 11 years reading the faces of people who wanted things from him, went back through the autumn in his head. Every prefect who'd been helpful, every older student who'd taken an interest in the famous first year, every adult whose warmth had come a half degree too easy, and found, when he looked at it that way, that there had been exactly one. A 7th year, a quiet, helpful Slytherin who tutored younger students in the library, as a kindness, who had, twice, offered to carry Hermione's books and had, once, picked up a quill. Harry dropped a knot. Harry now remembered with a cold turn of the stomach, given it back. he had not noticed at the time. That was the thing about people who wanted things. The good ones at it never let you notice. They did not confront him. Hermione forbade it, and she was right. A confrontation would only tell the branch that their finger in the school had been spotted, and then the branch would grow a new finger somewhere they couldn't see. So instead they did the patient thing, the Hermione thing. They watched the Watcher, and they let the branch believe its eyes in the castle were still good, and they fed those eyes, deliberately, a picture of two children drifting apart. It was Harry's idea, and it was a good one. Good enough that Hermione went quiet with respect when he said it. If the finger was reporting that Harry and Hermione were growing close, then the branch would keep trying to kill them, so they would make the finger report the opposite. They would stage for their Watcher a cooling snapped words in corridors, a library table given up, a coldness that the quiet, helpful 7th year could carry south like a gift. Let the branch think the compact was failing on its own. Let them believe they wouldn't need a third attempt because the two children were doing the work of pulling apart themselves. It cost them something to do it, and that was the part neither of them said aloud. The loud, said aloud, with things that unary when Harry walked past Hermione in a corridor and gave her the flat blank nothing face for the benefit of a Watcher 3 tables down, and felt, each time, a small real wrongness in it, because the face he was making was the Dursley face, the being furniture face, and making it at her at the one person who had never once treated him like furniture, turned his stomach even though he did rewrite died. But that bike be reads to it taught them a thing they wouldn't have words for until years later. That pretending to be apart in front of people who wanted you apart was its own kind of danger. Because the pretending had a weight, and if you carried it long enough your arms forgot the difference. They were careful after that January, never to perform a coldness longer than they had to. It was the first time either of them understood that the enemy didn't only want them dead, the enemy wanted them distant, and distance, it turned out, you could be tricked into building yourself. The second attempt did not come as cold. That was the cleverness of it, and it told them, once it was over, that whoever the hand belonged to had learned from the first failure and had adjusted, had understood that the two of them together made warmth the cold could not swallow, and had therefore chosen a weapon that did not care about warmth at all. It came on the 9th of February, and it came as a staircase. Hogwarts had 142 staircases and most of them moved, and the students learned early which ones swung where and when, and there was one long flight that ran up the west face of the castle past a tall arched window, and beyond the window there was a fall of 100 feet to the frozen courtyard, and on the 9th of February that staircase was where Harry found himself alone at 9 at night, because someone had sent him a note in Hermione's handwriting of Terkheim, and Hermione had at the same hour found a note in handwriting asking him to meet her. And Hermione had at the same night. Neither of them had written a word of it. The forgeries were good. They were good because whoever made them had been watching long enough to copy two children's hands, and that fact alone should have warned them, and it did, but it warned them a half-second too late, because they had both already climbed onto the same long staircase from its two ends, drawn to the middle by a lie in the other's writing, and when they were both on it, and only when they were both on it, every lamp along its length went out at once, and the staircase began with a grinding of ancient stone to swing away from the wall, not toward another landing. That was the thing Harry understood in the first black lurching second, his hand already out and grabbing the rail. The staircases swung to connect. This one was swinging to disconnect, pulling away from both the landings adjoined, out into the open air of the great stairwell, so that in a moment it would hang unmoored over a 100-foot drop with its two ends touching nothing, and everyone knew, every first year had been told, that you did not stay on a staircase that had come loose from its moorings, because a staircase that had come loose from its staircase that had come late that bat, hair wan. Her voice out of the dark below him, and he could not see her, and the staircase was still swinging, the window sliding past, the frozen courtyard a gray nothing far down through the glass. Harry, don't move. It's the steps, feel the steps, count them. He felt the steps, and he understood what she'd already worked out from her end, faster than him, because she was always faster. The steps were vanishing, one at a time, from both ends inward. The stone treads were fading out of existence, not crumbling, fading, the way the lamps had faded in the library, and the fade was coming toward the middle from both directions toward the 2 points on the staircase where two children stood, so that in perhaps a minute there would be no staircase left at all, only 2 people and 100 feet of air, and the compact would break the only way its enemies had left themselves. Because a fall is not cold and a fall does not care how warm, 2 joined lights burn. The middle, Hermione called, and he heard her moving. Heard her coming up toward him step by vanishing step, racing the fade, get to the middle, it's coming from both ends, so the middle goes last, get to the middle. They reached it together, of course they did. From 2 ends, racing 2 edges of the same disappearing thing, they arrived at the one stone tread that had not yet begun to fade, and they arrived at the same instant. And they did the thing their hands had learned in the library without either of them deciding to. They grabbed each other, palm to wrist, a climber's grip, and stood back to back on a single square of stone 100 feet up with the dark swinging around them, and the last steps dissolving at their feet, and Hermione said, fast. Into the dark, in the voice that turned fear into thinking, it is an illusion or it is real, and if it is real we're dead, so I am choosing to believe it is an illusion, because a real vanishing of that much enchanted stone would take a master, and this took a forger, and a forger takes shortcuts. And the shortcut is that it only has to look on. Hermione, if you're wrong, I'm not going to be right. I'm almost always right, and you're going to trust me, because that's the deal. That's term 2. We help each other, and right now, helping me means you have to believe the floor is there when your eyes say it isn't. And Harry felt her turn inside his grip, felt her get her arm fully around him and his around her, so that they were not back to back anymore, but facing, holding one shape on one stone, and she said, with her mouth onto the step that isn't there. And it's going to hold because it was never gone, it only looked gone. And the thing that made it wanted us to freeze on the last real stone until it faded too and dropped us. So we don't freeze. We walk on the air it told us wasn't there. Do you trust me? And here was the whole of it. Here was the entire second stage of 2 people going from bound against their will to freely choosing each other. Compressed into one black second on one stone, 100 feet up. Because trusting her meant stepping off a solid stone onto nothing on the strength of a girl's reasoning. And if she was wrong, they both died. And everything in Harry's body that had kept him alive for 12 years was screaming that you do not step off the solid thing. You never step off the solid thing. The solid thing is the only thing. And he looked at where her face was in the dark. The face he had spent 5 months collecting the slipped guards of, and he found that the thing he trusted was not her reasoning at all, brilliant as it was. It was her. Just her. The whole of her. The girl who'd forced his light back on and given him a book about flying and leaned her head on his shoulder for half a second in the firelight. He trusted her the way you trust the ground, which is to say without deciding to, which is to say completely. I trust you, he said. Count. 1, said Hermione. 2. Her grip on him tightened to bruising. 3. They stepped off the stone together into the black air where the staircase had told them there was nothing. And there was something. Her arm was around him, and his around her, and they came down together onto solid invisible stone that had never once actually gone anywhere, that had only worn the costume of absence, and the illusion cheated, its whole trick spent, its bluff called by a 12-year-old who trusted arithmetic more than her own eyes, and a boy who trusted the 12-year-old more than his own terror. The illusion broke. All at once, the lamps came up. The staircase was there, whole, every step of it, swinging gently back toward its landing as though nothing had happened, innocent of ever having tried to murder 2 children on behalf of a family that wanted a door left open, and they stood in the middle of it, wrapped around each other, shaking, alive, and above them, in a house that did not exist. A witness glass burned so bright and so long that its keeper wrote a single line in the house record that night, and underlined it, "The light does not merely join under threat, it has begun to hold the threat off." I have never seen this. I am afraid of who else will notice. You were right, Harry said when he could speak. He had not let go of her. She had not let Hatane shirts. I'm always right, Hermione said into his shoulder, and her voice cracked straight down the middle of the word right, and Harry understood that she had not been certain at all, that she had reasoned her way to a conclusion and then bet both their lives on it while feeling, underneath the certainty she'd performed for him, exactly as terrified as he was, and had performed the certainty anyway because he needed it, because term 2 was we help each other, and the help he needed was, for one of them to be sure, and she had perhatinated, was head of my dead light. Harry, I thought I was 90%. I made you step off 100 feet up on 90%. You told me it was 100? Of course I told you it was 100. You weren't going to step off on 90. Nobody steps off on 90, Hermione. He pulled back just enough to find her face. The lamps were gold and steady, and she was white and shaking and furious with herself. And he had never in his life been so sure of anything as he was of what he said next, which was not a large thing to say, which was in fact a very small and ordinary thing, and which was, between the two of them, everything. Next time tell me it's 90. I'll still step off. She stared at him. I'll still step off, he said again, so she'd have it, so she'd know it was a fact and not a comfort. If it's you telling me the number, I don't need it to be 100. And Hermione Granger, who could receive the truth only sideways, who had spent her whole armored life unable to be given a thing to her face, Hermione Granger heard that said straight to her, 100 feet up, on a staircase that had just failed to kill them, and for once she did not get up and leave, because there was nowhere to go and no version of leaving that did not mean letting go of him, and she found she could not let go of him, and she did the only other thing, which was to press her face bass into Helton. It was the most either of them had ever surrendered. It was more than the joined light. The joined light the magic had done. This they did themselves. Somewhere below, a portrait was hurrying off through its frames to fetch a teacher, and there would be questions, and Nix would have to be written to, and the file would gain a page, and the war they were in was not over and would not be over for years. But for one more breath, they stood in the gold light at the middle of the mended stair, holding each other up over 100 feet of air they had just walked out onto on nothing but trust, and neither of them was thinking about the compact at all. Which was, Nix would have told them, exactly when the compact was doing what it was never built to do, and exactly why, 200 miles south, its watchers had begun to be afraid. Chapter 2. End. Chapter 3. The household Sirius Black came out of a locked country 3 years after the letters, and the first thing he did with his freedom was cook breakfast very badly for two 14-year-olds who had learned to run a war without him. That was how Harry always remembered the summer the household began. The smell of burnt eggs in a house that had been dead for a decade, and Sirius standing at the Great Black Range in number 12 with a spatula he didn't know how to hold. Grinning like a man who has decided that ordinary things are a kind of magic if you've gone long enough without them, Kreacher watched from the doorway with an expression of pure betrayal. Hermione, cross-legged at the scrubbed kitchen table with the family ledgers open in front of her, did not look up from a column of 400-year-old sums, but she said, "The eggs are burning," in the flat, certain voice she used for facts, and Sirius said, "The eggs are characterful." And Harry laughed into his tea, and something in the old poisoned house, Hermione swore she felt it, and Hermione did not swear she felt it, and Hermione did not swear tongue the Begrulite. How Sirius got out is a long story, and not this one. The short version, the version that mattered to the household, was this. The man who should have been the acting head of the House of Black had spent Harry's whole childhood unable to take up the office, and while the office stood empty, the branch Nix had warned them of, the cold cinders, the door openers, the pure and biddable ones, had run the family's affairs by default. Through proxies and stewards they bought and votes they cornered, and had come within a Dembrator and a staircase of murdering their way to the airship. Clearing Sirius's name had taken 3 years, a great deal of Hermione's file, one furious speech to the Wiesengemot that a 14-year-old girl was technically not permitted to give and gave anyway, and Nix, who turned out to have been quietly gathering the proof for a decade and waiting for 2 children, reckless enough to make him use it. When it was done, Sirius walked free and took up the office that was his by blood and became the acting head of the House of Black, which meant, among 10,000 other things, that he was now the one adult in the world with the legal standing to end the compact by renouncing it. He offered. The first week he was out, before the eggs, before any of it, he sat the 2 of them down and offered. "I can end it," Sirius said. He'd said it plainly. No performance. The one time in that whole loud summer Harry saw him be entirely still. "I'm head now." The second means of dissolution. A renunciation by the acting head. "I can stand up in front of the family magic and unmake the thing that was done to you before you could talk. You'd be free of it. Both of you. Today if you want. No waiting until you're 17. No mutual release. I can just take it off you." He'd looked between them, and for a moment the reckless grin was nowhere on him and he looked like what he was, a man who'd lost 12 years to other people's decisions about his life and would have set fire to the world before he'd let the same be done to his godson. "I'd do it in a heartbeat. Say the word. I won't even ask you to think about it. God knows nobody thought about you when they made it." And here is the thing that told Harry and Hermione, more than any joy and delight, how far the 3 years had carried them. They said no, not together. They were too honest with each other by then to fake a togetherness they didn't have, but one after the other, arriving at the same answer down 2 different roads, the way they arrived at everything. Hermione said no first, and she said it the way she said hard things, sideways, to the ledger instead of to Sirius. "If you end it now, we never find out." That was all at first. Then because Sirius waited and Sirius had learned in a locked country how to wait. The entire point. The one thing that's ours in all of this. Point 4 of the treaty. Nobody decides for us. If you renounce it, that's you deciding. Kindly. For our own good. But it's still someone reaching into it from outside and arranging it. And I've spent 3 years telling anyone who'd listen that the only version of this that counts is the one where we choose it when we're old enough to mean it. I won't have spent 3 years saying that and then let it be taken off me a week before it gets interesting, because a nice man felt sorry for us. She looked up then, finally. "Thank you, I mean that. But no." Harry said no second, and he said it to Sirius directly, because Harry had learned from Hermione how to say the true thing to a face, and had decided that Sirius, of all people, was owed it. "I spent 11 years having every single thing about my life decided for me by people who didn't ask. And then this got decided for me too, and it was the worst one. A stranger, a magic, a family I'd never heard of. It should have been the worst one." He'd stopped, working out how to say a thing he'd only just that second fully understood himself, which was a thing that happened to him more and more around Hermione, the understanding arriving in the act of saying, "But it's the only one that turned into something good, not because of the magic, because of her. And if you take it off us now, before we choose it, then the compact wins, doesn't it? The people who made it win, because they'll have decided the ending too, even if the ending's kind. I don't want the kind ending they get to pick for me. I want the one me and Hermione pick ourselves, when we're 17, when the magic can taste whether we mean it." He looked at his godfather, this man he'd known 3 weeks and already loved with the ferocity of a boy who'd had no one to love for 11 years. "Keep the office, keep the power to end it, and promise me you'll never use it without us asking. That's what I want, not freedom. Custody of the choice." Sirius had looked at the 2 of them for a long time. Then he'd said quietly, "Your mother and father would be," and stopped because his voice had gone, and he'd got up and gone to the range and pretended to look for a pan, and that was the morning the burnt eggs began. He never used the power. He kept it, at their asking, a loaded and unfired thing, for 3 more years. It would matter, later, more than any of them knew, that the means of dissolution sat in the hands of the one adult who had sworn never to use it without leave, because there were others who wanted that power, and the fact that it lived with Sirius and not with them was, in the end, the hinge the whole last battle turned on. The household was Sirius's word for it, and it stuck, because it was exactly right and exactly not what anyone would have predicted for the House of Black. Number 12 had been a mausoleum, toujours per on the tapestry, house elf heads on the wall, a portrait of a screaming woman behind a curtain, and 40 generations of pride gone to rot and doxies in the curtains. Sirius could have sold it, or sealed it, or burned it, and part of him, the part that had grown up unloved in its cold rooms, wanted to. Hermione talked him out of it. She did it the Hermione way, with a plan and a folder, over a single long August afternoon, and her argument was not sentimental. Because sentiment bounced off Sirius Black like hexes off a wall, her argument was strategic, and it was this: you can't unmake the House of Black. Legally you can't, and magically you can't. It's a bound family. Its power is in its continuity. If you break the house, you break the thing that protects Harry's heirship, and you hand the whole succession fight to the cold senders on a plate, so you don't get to walk away from it. I'm sorry. I know you want to. She tapped the tapestry, the burnt hole where Sirius's own name had been scorched off by his mother for the crime of being decent. But you can decide what it's for. That's the whole thing I learned from the compact. It's the only useful thing I've learned in 3 years. You almost never get to choose the walls, but you always get to choose what the room is for. The House of Black has been a room for cruelty for 400 years. Nobody can tear it down. But you're the head now. You get to say what it's a room for. Starting today, starting with this kitchen. And she looked around at the cold black kitchen with the range that hadn't been lit in a decade and said, I think it should be for this. For people the house would have thrown away. You, Harry, me. I'm Muggleborn. I'm exactly what toujours per was written to keep out, and I'm sitting in your kitchen running your ledgers. Make the house a room for the people it was built to exclude. That's the only revenge on it that'll actually hold. Nick said that, sort of. 3 years ago. I'd been thinking about it ever since. Sirius had looked at her, this fierce Muggle-born 14-year-old rearranging 4 centuries of his family's meaning over a cup of tea, and then he'd looked at Harry, who was watching Hermione with an expression Sirius had clocked the very first day and had the tact never to name, and he'd said, Merlin help me, she's right, and she's going to be right about everything for the rest of your life. You know that, don't you? And Harry had said, I've known that since I was 11, and Hermione had gone pink and said, I write about most things, not everything. That's an Engadyfout, at Bount Rightite. So they made the house a household. It took the whole summer, and it was the happiest Harry had ever been, which is a low bar for a boy raised in a cupboard. But he cleared it and kept climbing. They cleaned the doxies out of the curtains, the 3 of them and a grudging creature who slowly, over the weeks, stopped being grudging as it dawned on the old elf that these strange young people were not going to hurt the house but were, incomprehensibly, trying to make it warm. They took down the elf heads and buried them, which made Creature weep and then, bafflingly, love them. They could not get the portrait of Sirius's mother to stop screaming, but Hermione, after a fortnight of research, worked out how to make the curtain that hid her permanent, and the day the screaming finally went quiet behind sealed velvet, the 3 of them stood in the hall and the sudden Sirius laughed, until he had to sit down on the stairs. And in the evenings when the work was done, they sat in the kitchen that had learned to be warm, and they were, for the first time in any of their lives, a family. A strange one, assembled out of a wrongful imprisonment and a forced betrothal and a Muggle-born girl who'd invited herself in with a folder, but a family, the found kind, the chosen kind, the kind the House of Black had spent 400 years being unable to produce and had finally, by accident, by the failure of all its cruelties, produced anyway. Harry, who kept things, kept that summer. He would need it. There were years coming when the memory of that warm kitchen would be the thing he stepped off staircases on. There was one evening in particular he kept, filed in the real place, the place with the good lock. It was late July, the doxies gone, the elf heads buried, the household not yet a household, but becoming one. And Sirius had gone up to bed, and Creature had shuffled off muttering something that was, for once, not an insult. And it was just the 2 of them in the kitchen with the range dying down. Hermione had fallen asleep over the ledgers, actually asleep, mid-sentence, her cheek on 400 years of black accounts, ink on her face where she'd pressed it into a wet entry, and Harry had sat and looked at her for a while, and Hermione Granger with her guard all the way down for once, undefended, drooling faintly onto a column of sums, and he had understood something he hadn't had words for at 11, and barely had them at 14. That this exact unremarkable thing, a friend asleep at a table in a warm room while the rain came down outside, was the thing, not even love, exactly, or not the kind with a capital letter, just safety, company. A person who trusted you enough to fall asleep in front of you. He had never in 11 years been trusted enough by anyone to be fallen asleep in front of, and he sat with it and let it be enormous and eventually got a blanket off the settle in the hall and put it over her shoulders and let her sleep, and did not tell her about it in the morning, because some things you keep for yourself, not out of secrecy but out of the wish to have one thing that stays exactly as it was. She woke at dawn with a ledger crease down her cheek and demanded to know who'd put the blanket on her, and Harry said he hadn't noticed. And she looked at him for a long moment and did not believe him and did not push it, and that was its own kind of tenderness, the letting a kindness stay unclaimed kind, which is a language only two very guarded people ever really learn to speak. But a household is not only a warmth, it is also, if it is a house like the House of Black, a set of obligations with teeth, and this was the summer the teeth came out. Because the summer Sirius took up the office was the summer the air law stopped being a thing in Hermione's file and became a thing at the front door. The front door of number 12 received, that August, a formal delegation of the House of Black. They came in the old way, which was to say they came without warning and with total confidence of their welcome, and they came led by a woman named Cassiopeia Black, a cousin of Sirius's, second or third the branch's chosen voice, a woman of about 70 who wore her 400 years of family like a coronation and spoke to Harry as though addressing a stain that had learned to talk. She was not stupid. That was the first thing Hermione said afterward, and the most important, and she said it the way you'd flag a live wire. She's not stupid, Harry. Don't ever let his manners make you think the branch is stupid. Stupid people don't survive 400 years of a family like this. She is the cleverest and most dangerous person who has ever sat in this kitchen, and she came here to lose on purpose so she could learn how we win. Cassiopeia came, ostensibly, to congratulate Sirius on his freedom. She stayed to lay out, with exquisite courtesy, the legal situation, and the legal situation was a noose. "You have taken up the office, cousin," she said, over tea she had inspected and declined to drink. "I'm sure we're all delighted. But the office is not a chair, it is a covenant, and the covenant has terms, and I wonder, forgiven old woman, whether anyone has trouble to explain the terms to you, given where you've spent the last 12 years. She had a way of putting a knife inside a courtesy so that you felt the courtesy first and the knife a beat later, when it was already in. The head of the House of Black holds the house's magic in trust. He does not own it, he tends it. And the house's magic has a, let us call it a constitution. It permits the head a great deal. It does not permit him to weaken the line. A head who acts against the continuance or the purity of the house can be found in dereliction, and a head found in dereliction can be removed by a vote of the family's elders, and the office passed to the next fit heir." She smiled. It was a beautiful, terrible, entirely sincere smile. "I mention it only so that you understand your position. You are head, but you are head of a family that watches you and judges you and has removed heads before, too, in 400 years. Both removals upheld by the magic itself. The house does not tolerate a head who fails it. And then, having made the threat, she made the offer, because Cassiopeia Black never made a threat that did not come with a door. The door was this, the compact. The compact was, in the branch's eyes, the worst of Sirius's derelictions in waiting, a muggle-born girl and a half-blood boy set to fill a sealed black betrothal and produce, in time, the next generation of the line. Tis branch, it was pollution written into the family's deepest magic. And Cassiopeia laid out, with the same lethal courtesy, that if Sirius would use his authority as head, to renounce the compact, to unmake it, to free the two children, to leave the sealed betrothal empty and reassignable, then the branch would consider the gesture a proof of good faith, would withdraw its watch, would let him keep his office in peace, free the children the branch wanted freed, and the family would forgive him for the crime of being decent. "You see," Cassiopeia said, rising, drawing on her gloves, "I am not the villain your girl there has decided I am." She looked at Hermione when she said it, and Hermione had looked back and not dropped her eyes, and something had passed between the 70-year-old and the 14-year-old that Harry could not read and did not like. "I am offering to give her what she says she wants. Her freedom. The end of the cage. She's written whole ledgers about wanting out of it. Oh yes, I've read your file, child. You'd be amazed what the house can read. And here I am, offering to hand you the key. The only price is that your head does it for you, from above, as a favor to his family. Surely a small thing, next to freedom." She paused at the door. "Do think about it. All of you. The offer stands until the equinox. After that, I'm afraid the family will draw its own conclusions about a head who keeps a pollution in the line when he had every chance to cleanse it." She left. The household sat in the warm kitchen that had gone cold around the edges, and for a while nobody said anything, and then Hermione started to laugh, low and not quite steady, and Harry said, "What?" And Hermione said, "She's good." "Harry, she's so good. Do you see what she did? She took the one thing we've said for 3 years, that we want out, and she offered us exactly that, and made it a trap. Because if we say yes, if we let Sirius renounce it, then the branch wins twice over, the compact's gone, the door's open, they can reassign the heirship to some pure biddable child, and they've made us ask for it. We'd have opened the door with our own hands, and thanked them for the hinge. And if we say no," she spread her hands, "if we say no, then we've admitted that we don't actually want out, that we want this, This exact compact, us, and we've been telling everyone for 3 years we wanted the opposite. So we look like liars or fools, and worse, we've handed the branch a story. The head keeps his godson chained to a mudblood out of sentiment and calls it love. Dereliction, grounds to remove him. Either way, she wins. That's... And Hermione's laugh finally steadied into something with iron in it, the laugh of a mind that has met its match and is, despite everything, delighted, because there was no one alive who loved a hard problem more than Hermione Granger, and Cassiopeia had just handed her the hardest one of her life. That's the most beautiful piece of work I've ever seen, and we're going to beat it. Get me the ledgers, get me all of them, and get me Nick's. She said she's read my file. Fine, let's find out what's in hers. Harry looked at her, pink with fury and joy, already reaching for the ledgers, already 3 moves into a game that would take 3 years to finish, and understood that whatever the compact had been at the start, whatever cage, whatever accident, it had become the thing that had put this person in his kitchen and on his side, and he would not have traded that, cage and all, for any freedom Cassiopeia Black could name. The partnership, that summer and the years that followed it, became a thing with a shape, and the shape was this. Hermione saw the board and Harry saw the people, and neither of them could win alone, and together they almost never lost. It had started small, in a library over a file. By 15, it was the way they moved through the world. Hermione would map a problem, the heir law, the branch's votes among the elders, the exact wording of the covenant that Cassiopeia had threatened them with, into a structure she could hold in her head, and she would find, inside the structure she could hold in her head, and she would find, inside the structure, the load-bearing point, the one place where pressure would bring the whole thing down. And then she would hand that point to Harry, because Hermione could find the lever but Harry could move the person, and every load-bearing point in a family war turned out to be, when you got down to it, a person, a wavering elder, a bought steward, a cousin who'd never once been asked what she wanted. Harry could walk into a room and make a frightened person less frightened, could make a proud person feel seen, could sit with an old witch the whole family had written off and listen to her until she told him the thing that turned the vote, because Harry had spent 11 years being invisible and had learned, in that invisibility, to see, and there is nothing in this world so disarming as being truly seen by someone who wants nothing from you but the truth. They lost sometimes. They lost a vote among the elders in Harry's 5th year badly, because Hermione had found the perfect lever and Harry had misjudged the man on the other end of it, had trusted a cousin who'd smiled the right way and then voted with the branch, and Harry had taken it hard, had said, "I was sure. I read him. I was sure," in the tone of a boy for whom reading people was the one thing he'd always had, and Hermione had not comforted him, because comfort was not the deal was honesty, and she'd said, "You read him right. He was wavering. You just didn't know Cassiopeia had his son's debts. That's not a failure of reading people, that's a failure of information. And information is my job, and I missed it, so this one's mine, not yours." And she'd taken the loss off him and onto herself. Not out of pity, but out of accuracy, because it was genuinely hers, and Harry had looked at her and understood that this was what it was to have a partner. Someone who would take the exactly correct portion of the blame and not 1 ounce more. Because taking too much would be a lie, and lies were the one thing they'd sworn, because the taking too much would be a lie, and not what how and not. That was the partnership. It was not romantic, or it was, but not in any way either of them would have said out loud at 15. Not in any way the compact could have compelled. Not in any way that would have shown in a witness glass as anything but 2 lights that had learned to burn as one. It was something better than romance and older than it, the thing romance is supposed to be built on top of, and so rarely is. 2 people who had become, through 3 years of shared danger and shared work and a great many burnt eggs, genuinely necessary to each other, not because a magic said so. Because they made themselves necessary, 1 lever and 1 person and 1 honest correction at a time. And the branch watched the witness glass in the south, and saw the light burn steadier and brighter every season, and grew, as Nix had promised, afraid. The clearest picture of what the 2 of them had become. The surviving photograph, the one Harry would hold up against the dark years later, was a night in the Michaelmas of their 6th year, in a room in number 12 that no one had used since Sirius's grandfather died, the Elder's Chamber, where the family's oldest living members gathered 4 times a year to sit in judgment on the house, and where, that night, they had gathered to hear a petition Hermione had spent 5 months engineering the right to bring. The petition was small on its face. It asked the elders to confirm, in the family record, a point of the covenant that no one had thought to nail down in 400 years because no one had ever needed to, that a sealed compact, once its light had joined, could not be counted against the standing of the head who declined to renounce it. It was a dry, procedural, almost invisible request. It was also, Hermione had explained to Harry over 6 weeks of ledgers, the entire war. Because if the elders confirmed it, then Cassiopeia's whole trap collapsed. Sirius keeping the compact could never again be called dereliction, and the branch would lose its lever to remove him, and the succession would be safe. It was the load-bearing point. Hermione had found it the way she found everything, by reading 400 years of records until the one crack showed. And now Harry had to walk into a room full of ancient, suspicious, blood-proud witches and wizards, most of whom thought he was pollution and move enough of them to pass it. There were 11 elders. They needed 6. Hermione had mapped all 11 for him, a folder apiece, who was truly the branches and unreachable, who was truly Sirius's and safe, and in the middle, the three she called the hinges. Three old ones who were neither, who could go either way, and who would decide it. She could not move them. She'd said so plainly, and it had cost her to say because there was so little Hermione Granger could not do. I can tell you everything about them, what they want, what they're afraid of, who owes them and who they owe. I can hand you the door and the key and the exact angle to turn it, but I can't walk through it. The second I open my mouth in that room, they see a muggle-born girl telling the House of Black its own law, and every word I say, however right, lands as an insult. You have to be the one. It has to be you. I'm the map. You're the road. So Harry walked into the Elder's chamber alone. Hermione was not permitted in it, and had stationed herself outside the door with the folders, close enough that he could feel her there through 6 inches of 400-year-old oak, and he did the thing he had spent 3 years learning to do, which was to see the people the house had stopped seeing. The first hinge was a man named Regulus Arcturus's cousin Black, 90 years old, who had lost a son to the last war and never spoken of it, and whom the whole family treated as a relic to be managed. Harry did not manage him. Harry asked him about his son. Not as a lever. Hermione had told him the son was the lever, and Harry had refused to use it as one. Had told her, I'll ask because I want to know, or I won't ask at all. I'm not going to do to him what Cassiopeia does to people. And Hermione had looked at him for a long moment and said, that's why it has to be you and not me. I'd use it. You won't, and he'll know the difference. That's the whole thing you have that I don't. And she was right. The old man saw a 15-year-old asking about his dead son because he actually wanted to know who the son had been, and something that had been shut in the old man for 40 years opened by a crack, and he told Harry about a young man who had died trying to do one decent thing in a family that had no room for decent things, and Harry listened all the way he'd once listened to a lonely clever girl in a tea shop, and at the end of it the old man said quietly, my son would have voted for it. He'd have liked you. He liked things the house didn't have a use for. And that was one hinge, turned not by a lever, but by the truth. The second hinge was harder and colder. A witch named Lucretia, who cared for nothing but the continuance of the line and saw the compact exactly as Cassiopeia did, as pollution in the family's deepest magic. Harry could not warm her. There was nothing in her to warm, so he did the other thing Hermione had taught him. The thing that had taken him longest to learn because it went against every instinct a kind person has. He stopped trying to make her like him and made her calculate. He laid out in the flat, sure voice he'd learned from Hermione herself, the arithmetic of the branch's plan. That reassigning the heirship meant a succession fight, and a succession fight meant the family's power divided for a generation, and a family divided for a generation was a family the rest of Wizarding Britain would eat alive. You don't have to approve of me, he told her, and it was the truest thing he could have said, and therefore the most persuasive. You think I'm beneath the house? Fine, I'm not asking you to change that. I'm asking you to notice that Cassiopeia's plan makes the house weaker, and I'm the only person in this room whose interests line up with the house staying strong, because the house staying strong is the only thing keeping me alive. We want the same thing for opposite reasons. You don't have to like me to vote with me. You just have to want the house to survive more than you want it to be pure. And Lucretia, who had never in 90 years been offered a way to vote her interests without pretending to vote her values, looked at this half-blood boy who had just handed her a clean piece of arithmetic instead of a plea, and respected the arithmetic. Because arithmetic was the one thing the branch respected, and that was two. The third hinge Harry lost. He lost her because Cassiopeia had got there first, months first, with a debt and a threat, exactly as she'd got to the cousin in 5th year, and there was no lever and no truth and no arithmetic that could move a woman whose grandchild's future Cassiopeia held in her hand. Harry felt it go. Felt the door stay shut no matter how he turned the key, and for a second the 5th year loss rose up in him. The eye was sure. And then he did the thing that 3 years with Hermione had built into him. The thing that separated the child who lost in 5th year from the young man in this chamber. He stopped trying to win the vote he'd already lost, and counted the votes he had. 2 hinges. The safe ones. 6. Exactly 6. He didn't need the third. Hermione's map had shown 3 hinges because 3 could go either way. Not because he needed all 3. She'd built him slack. The way she built him slack. The way she built everything. A margin for the loss she knew was coming, because Hermione Granger never brought a plan to a fight that didn't survive one thing going wrong. He had 6. He called the vote before Cassiopeia's people understood he'd stopped fighting for the 7th, and it passed, 6-5, and the crack in 400 years of covenant closed over the branch's whole trap, and Sirius's office was safe, and outside the door, through 6 inches of oak, Harry heard a single sharp exhale that was Hermione Granger allowing herself for 1 second to have been terrified. He came out. She was against the far wall, with the folders clutched to her chest and the arms crossed over something precious pose, white and blazing, and she didn't say, did we win, because she'd counted the votes through the door by the sounds the old ones made. She said, you lost a third one. I lost a third one. Good, said Hermione, and it was the exact words she'd said to him in a tea shop 5 years before, and they both heard the echo, and neither of them mentioned it. If you'd won all three, I'd have known you'd promised someone something you shouldn't have. You won the two that could be won on the truth, and you let the bought one go, and you called it before they could regroup. She was nodding fast, hard, the whole board still lit behind her eyes. That's... Harry, that's exactly right. That's the cleanest thing you've ever done. You were the road. You were the whole road. And then because she was Hermione and the fear had to go somewhere, I couldn't hear the second hinge. Lucretia. I couldn't hear how you turned her. She's stone. She's actual stone. What did you say to her? And Harry started to tell her, walking down the cold corridor of the house that had become a home, the two of them shoulder to shoulder where no glass could see. And that was the partnership. That was the whole of it. The map and the road, the lever and the person, 6 months of work and 5 minutes of nerve and one shared understanding that neither of them could have done any of it without the other. And the House of Black, which had been built 400 years ago to keep exactly these two people out, had you not just Matt hafted the that halves. Not all of it was war. This is the part the histories never record because the histories only keep the battles, and the battles were the smallest part of what those years were made of. They were made mostly of ordinary hours, of Harry teaching Hermione to fly badly over 3 summers because she was afraid of it and hated being afraid of anything and had therefore decided to conquer it, and of Harry discovering that the one place he could out-argue Hermione Granger was 6 feet off the ground where her books couldn't help her, and of Hermione, white-knuckled on a school broom, finally letting go of the handle with one hand for 1 second and whooping, actually whooping, a sound Harry had never heard her make, booping a Dante to be brought down at once. They were made of serious, terrible at every domestic thing he attempted, and magnificent at the only one that mattered, which was making a house feel like it had been waiting for you. Of Creature learning to bake, of all impossible things, and leaving small savory pastries outside Hermione's door because she was the only one who thanked him by name. Of long evenings in the warm kitchen where the 4 of them and Nyx, when he came, argued about everything and nothing, and where Harry sometimes looked up from the noise and the light and had to look back down again quickly, because the size of what he had, a godfather, a home, a girl who told him the truth, a table with a place at it, was more than he had built the room in his chest to hold, and he had that once, at Christmas of their 5th year, Hermione had given him a book again. She gave him a book every year. It had become a private tradition, always old, always secondhand, always the exact right one. And this one was a battered guide to constellations, Muggle-made, the stars named the ordinary way and not the way the House of Black named them. And when he'd asked her why that one, she'd gone pink and said, sideways to the fire. Because her whole family names its people after stars and treats them like property. Bellatrix, Regulus, Sirius, all of them, pinned to the sky like specimens, and I wanted you to have the other way of looking at them. The way where they're just, beautiful, and far away, and yours to look at, and nobody owns them, and nobody named you after one to make you into a thing. She'd handed it over without looking at him. You're not a star in their sky. You're a person looking up at all of it, same as me. I wanted you to have a book that remembered that. And Harry had kept it, of course, the way he kept everything. And on clear nights at school, he would climb to the astronomy tower with it and find the constellations the Muggle way, the Free way, the Hermione way, and think about a girl 200 miles inside his own castle who had understood, before he did, that the whole point of everything they were fighting for was the right to look up at the sky without being owned by it. The turn. The thing that made this the summer the partnership became a household and not just an alliance came on a night in late August close to the equinox and Cassiopeia's deadline, and it came as the important things always did for them, quietly and without anyone deciding it in advance. They were in the kitchen, late, the 3 of them and Nyx, who had taken to coming to number 12 in the evenings the way a man returns to a house he'd thought he'd only ever work in. The ledgers were spread across the table. They had found, after weeks, the shape of the answer to Cassiopeia. It was not a single lever but a slow one, a campaign among the elders that would take years and that they had only just begun. And the finding had left them tired and quiet and closer than triumph would have. Sirius had fallen asleep in the armchair by the range with Creature, unbelievably dozing on the arm of it. Nyx sat with a glass of something dark, watching the 2 children he had carried into all of this in an envelope, and Harry and Hermione were at the table with the last of the ledgers, not working anymore, just sitting, shoulder to shoulder in the way they never did where the glass could see and always did hear. Hermione said, out of nowhere, in the small voice she used for the truest things, I used to hate it so much. Harry didn't ask what. There was only one it. When we were 11, in the tea shop. I made that list because I was furious, Harry. I'd finally found a place I might belong. Magic. School. The one place being clever might not make people hate me. And before I'd even got there, someone had reached in and arranged me. Attached me to a stranger. Decided the shape of my whole life before I'd had a single day of it being mine. She was turning a quill over in her fingers, not looking at him, and I promised myself I'd never forgive it. And I put it in the treaty, point 5. We're allowed to hate it, and I meant it more than anything I'd ever written. I hated it. I hated that a piece of magic 400 years old thought it got to tell me She stopped. Nyx, across the table, had gone very still the way a man goes still when he realizes he is present at something he was not invited to and cannot decently leave. And the thing is, Harry, I still hate it. That's what I need to say this out loud to you, because it's the most honest thing I've got, and honesty's the whole deal. I still hate the compact. I hate that we didn't choose it. I hate that some ancestor and some magic decided us before we could talk. I will hate it until the day I die, and probably after. She finally looked up at him. But I don't hate you. I've never hated you. Not for a single second, not even in the tea shop when I walked in ready to. And somewhere in the last 3 years, I stopped being able to tell the difference between the thing I hate and the person and there she stopped. Because there was a word at the end of that sentence, and it was too big and too soon, and she was 15, and she did the thing she always did with the words that were too big. She went sideways. The person I'd step off a staircase on 90% for. And I need you to know that those are two different things. That I can hate the cage with my whole heart and still not want out of the room. Because the room has you in it, and I'd rather be in a room I didn't choose with someone I did than free and alone in the whole open world. And that's Harry. That's not the magic making me say that. The magic can't make anyone say that. Nyx told us at the start, the magic just puts you in the room. What happens in the room is the people. This is me, in the room, saying it, choosing it, as much as anyone can choose anything at 15. Which isn't all the way, but it started, and I wanted you to be the one I said it to first, before the equinox, before Cassiopeia, before any of them, because they all think they're deciding what happens to us, and I wanted there to be one true thing on the record that only we decided. Us. Nobody else. Point 4. The kitchen was very quiet. The range ticked. Sirius slept. Nyx did not move. Harry looked at her for a long moment, at this girl who had just done the bravest thing he had ever seen her do, which was not step off a staircase but say a true thing to a face across a table, with no illusion to hide behind, and he understood that she had handed him something he could break, with a wrong word, and that she had handed it to him precisely because he could break it and wouldn't, because trusting him not to break it was the whole content of what she was saying. I hate it too, he said. I want that on the record first, because you're right, it's the deal. And I'm not going to pretend 3 years of it being good means I've forgiven what they did to us at the start. I haven't. I hate that we didn't choose it just as much as you do. He turned toward her, so it was said to her face and not to the ledgers. But here's my true thing, and I've known it longer than tonight. I've known it since a staircase. I just didn't know how to say it until you went first. You always go first on the brave ones. A breath. I don't want out. Not if out means without you. And I know that's dangerous. I know the magic put us here. I know we can't ever be totally sure the wanting is ours and not the bindings. And I don't care. I've decided not to care, because here's the thing I worked out, the thing that let me stop caring. Even if the magic put us in the room, the magic didn't make you give me a book about flying, or take a loss off me that was mine to carry, or lean your head on my shoulder for half a second when you thought I didn't notice. I noticed. I've noticed everything. I've been collecting you since I was 11. The magic couldn't make any of that. That's all you. And a compact can force two people into a room, but it cannot, in 400 years, force one of them to become the person I'd want to be in a room with. It got lucky, or it didn't, or there's no such thing as luck, and something older than all of us knew what it was doing. But either way, the you part, the part I want, that was never the magic's to give or take, so they can have their cage. They made the walls, fine. But the person in it with me, he found he had reached over and put his hand over hers on the ledger, the climber's grip, the library grip, the grip their hands had learned in the dark and never forgotten. I chose her. I'm choosing her right now. And I'll choose her again when I'm 17 in front of the magic, when it can taste whether I mean it. And it'll taste that I do, and there's nothing Cassiopeia Black or 400 years of 2 years per can do about it. Because the one thing they never built a room for is two people they threw away deciding to keep each other. Across the table, Alcyon Nyx set down his glass, very carefully, and rose and said, in a voice not entirely steady, I find I need some air, and went out into the hall, and stood alone in the dark by the sealed velvet curtain that hid a screaming portrait, and did a screaming portrait, and did a thing he had not done in 30 years of service to the House of Black, which was to put his hand over his eyes. He had carried their names in an envelope. He had done sums about them in a muggle front room. He had told a father, 3 years ago, that the most dangerous and valuable thing he had ever seen was two children becoming something the house had no word for. He had been right. And he stood in the dark of the mausoleum that had become a household and understood that he was going to spend whatever was left of his life making sure the house did not destroy the one good thing it had ever accidentally made, and that this was the closest thing to a purpose he had ever had, and that he was grateful for it, in the bitter and belated way of a man who finds his reason for living rather later than he would have chosen. In the kitchen, Harry and Hermione sat with their hands stacked on a 400-year-old ledger, not saying anything more, because everything had been said. The equinox was coming. Cassiopeia's trap was set. There were years of the Branches' war still ahead, and a threat neither of them yet saw coming that would test every word they'd just spoken. But the household slept warm around them, and the light in the southern glass burned steady and bright and singular, and somewhere below the place where memory lives, in the deep architecture where a magic 400 years old held two children in a room it had built, something that had waited a very long time to be answered was at last beginning to be. Chapter 3. End. Chapter 4. The price the stars named the witness glass showed a flaw in the light, and Nix found it at 4 in the morning, and by dawn he understood that the House of Black had finally worked out how to kill one of them without touching either. He had kept a witness glass of his own for years. Not the house's, which the branch controlled, but a copy he had made in secret and warded in the deepest cellar of number 12, because a man does not serve a family like the Blacks for 30 years without learning to keep his own eyes. He looked into it most nights, the way some men look at a photograph. The single-joined light had burned in it, steady and bright and singular since a staircase 4 years ago, and Nix had come to find it a comfort, which was not a thing he had expected ever to feel again about anything the house produced. But that night, the light was not steady. Deep inside it, at the winding where the two threads met, there was a thinness. A place where the joined light had begun, very slightly, to gutter. Not to come apart, the histories were right that it could not come apart. The histories were right that it could not come apart, but to thin. The way ice thins from underneath while the surface still looks whole. He knew what it meant because he had read every record the house kept, including the ones the house had tried to forget it kept, and he sat in the cold cellar with the guttering light in his hands until the sky grayed over the crooked roofs of the square, and then he woke the household. And he told them because the first term of their treaty was honesty, and Nix had come, over 4 years, to hold their treaty more sacred than any covenant of the house. There is a clause, he said. They were in the kitchen, the 4 of them, the range, unlit, the dawn coming gray through the window, and Nix spoke the way he'd spoken to 2 frightened children in a muggle front room, flat and exact and without the mercy of softening, because he owed them the truth whole, in the deepest stratum of the compact. Below the words, below even the diagram I showed you as children. The House of Black did not only build betrothals into its magic, it built insurance. Every sealed compact carries at its foundation a provision the family called the redress, a term that wakes only if the house itself judges the match a threat to the line, and that is not woken in 300 years, because in 300 years, no compact has produced a pairing the house feared. Yours has. He set a page on the table, copied out in his own hand from a book that should not exist. The redress does not break the bond. It cannot. Nothing can. That is the whole horror of what I have to tell you. What it does is worse. When a compact matures, when the 2 bound parties come of age and the betrothal ripens toward its completion, the marriage the magic was built to make. The deep magic exacts a settling. A price. In an ordinary compact, the price is nothing. A formality, a drop of blood and a vow. But when the redress is woken, the price is woken. The NFU2. It is thrown. Deliberately. Onto one of the 2. And the house, through its head, or, if the head is compromised, through a vote of its elders, chooses which. The kitchen was silent. Sirius had gone the color of ash. Harry had not moved. Hermione was reading the page and her lips were moving, and Nix watched her reach the bottom of it and go still. They've woken it, Hermione said. It was not a question. Cassiopeia. The branch. They lost the vote in the elders' chamber. They couldn't remove Sirius. They couldn't reassign the airship. So they went underneath all of it to the oldest stratum, and they woke the redress. And they've weighted the price. She looked up, and her face had done the thing it did only under the worst pressure, gone perfectly calm. All the feeling pulled down out of sight where it could not interfere with thinking. On to me. Haven't they? Because I'm the Muggle-born. Because to the house, I'm the impurity in the line. When the compact matures, when Harry and I complete it, when we come of age and a betrothal ripens into the marriage it was built to become, the price falls on me. And the price is, she stopped. Even Hermione Granger could not read that word off a page in a warm kitchen and say it lightly. The price is my life. Or near enough that the histories don't bother with the difference. The word they use is the word from the case in 1806. Unfinished. Except reversed. He stayed unfinished because he refused the compact. I'd be unfinished because I completed one the house had cursed to collect me at the finish. Nix inclined his head. Once, the smallest possible motion, because there was nothing to say that would be true and kind at once, and he would not say a thing that was only kind. So, that's the trap, Harry said. His voice was very quiet, and Hermione's head came up at the sound of it, because she knew that quiet, it was the quiet from the top of a staircase 4 years ago, the quiet of a boy deciding something. That's the real one. Everything else was. Cassiopeia was never going to beat us in a vote or a court. We're better at those than she is. She found that out. So she went and found the one weapon we can't out-argue. She's turned the compact itself into the thing that kills you. If we complete it, you die. And if we don't complete it, Hermione said, the compact stays open, unfinished, and I stay unfinished with it. I spend 40 years watching my life slide off me like the man in 1806, and worse, so do you, because you're bound to me, and a bound man can't build a life either. Or, she said the way you set down something heavy. Or we take the third means of dissolution. Mutual release. We stand up in front of the magic when we come of age and we freely, both of us, let each other go. The compact dissolves. The redress dies with it because there's no compact left to mature, no finish for it to collect at, and I live. And you live. And we're free. Her calm did not break. That was the terrible thing. She had done the whole sum in under a minute and arrived at the answer, and her voice did not shake at all. That's the way out, Harry. That's the loophole I looked for when we were 11. It was there the whole time. Mutual release. We let each other go and we both live. Cassiopeia hasn't built a trap with no exit. She's built a trap with exactly one exit, and the exit is the thing the branch wanted from the very first day. The exit is us, apart, and the compact empty, and the door open. She folded the page in half along its crease. Precise, final. She's not going to kill me. She's far too clever for that. She's going to make us choose to end it, to save my life, and thank her for the mercy of leaving us the choice. The way she made us the offer at 14. The exact same move. She just made the price of refusing it my life instead of Sirius's office. Here's what the branch understood about Harry and Hermione, and it was the one true thing they had ever understood, and they had built their whole endgame on it. That each of the two would rather die than be the cause of the other's death. They were right. That was the horror of being seen accurately by an enemy. Cassiopeia Black had looked at 4 years of a joined light and understood the two people inside it better than they let anyone understand them, and she had built her trap not on their weakness but on their love, which is the only place a trap can be built for people like that. Because people like that have no weaknesses that matter and love more than they can bear. She knew Harry would never complete a bond that killed Hermione. She knew Hermione would never let Harry spend his life unfinished for her sake. She knew that the only move left to two people who loved each other that much and understood arithmetic that well was the release, and that the release was her victory. She had turned their greatest strengths into the lever that would pry them apart, and she had done it with a courtesy so complete that when she called at number 12 3 days later, uninvited, confident of her welcome, she came bearing not a threat, but a condolence. I was so sorry to learn of the red dress, Cassiopeia said. Over tea she again declined to drink. She looked older than she had at 14. 4 years had told on her to, but the beautiful, terrible sincerity was undimmed. You must believe I take no pleasure in it. I am an old woman who loves her family, and the red dress is an ancient and dreadful thing, and I would not have woken it if you had left me any other way to protect the line. But you would not lose a vote gracefully. You would not let the office pass. You made yourselves permanent, over and over, when all the house asked was that you let one small door stay open, so the house reached for the last thing it had. She had looked at Hermione then, and there had been something in her face that was almost, not kindness. Cassiopeia had no kindness, but recognition. The recognition of one formidable mind for another. You understand me, child. You always have. Better than anyone in my own family. You know I am not offering you death. Death would be crude, and I am not crude. I am offering you life. Yours and the boys. All you have to do is let each other go as you have said for 7 years you wish to. Take the release. Live. Be free of us. Isn't that what your list demanded at 11? We keep looking for the way out. Here is the way out. I am handing it to you. The only thing it costs is the one thing you spent 7 years pretending you wanted to be rid of anyway. And she had risen and drawn on her gloves and paused at the door the way she always did, because Cassiopeia Black never left a room without leaving a knife in it. You'll take it, she said gently, almost tenderly. Not because I've beaten you. Because you love each other too much, not to. That was always the flaw in you two. You were never willing to let the other one pay, and a person who won't let the one they love pay any price at all, that person can always be moved, because all you have to do is arrange things so that staying together is the price. I did learn something from you over the years. I learned that the strongest bond in the world is also the easiest handle to carry it by. Take the release, children, save each other, and leave my family in peace. She left. And the household sat in the warm kitchen that had gone cold, and this time Hermione did not laugh because there was nothing in it to admire. It was not a beautiful piece of work. It was just cruel and correct, and it was going to work, and everyone in the room knew it. The redress was not content to wait for the compact to mature. That was the thing none of them had understood from the page, that an ancient magic weighted against a life does not sit politely by until the appointed hour. It leans, and a thing that leans on a life for months leaves marks. It came for Hermione first in October, in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, and it came as cold, but not the library's cold, not the borrowed cold of a Dementor that wanted warmth. This cold came from inside her. Harry was across the common room when it happened, and he knew before she made a sound, because he had spent 7 years learning the weather of her, and he saw her go the color of the page Nyx had laid on the table, and her quill stop on the parchment and her hand open and let it fall. He reached her as she went down. She was cold to the touch, cold from the center out, her lips graying, and her eyes were open and terrified and fixed on nothing, and when he got his arms around her he felt it, felt the thing the redress was doing, felt the deep magic reaching down into the winding of the joined light and pulling. Not on the light. It couldn't touch the light, but on her, on the thread of her. Trying to fray it loose from the world. He did the only thing he knew. He did the library thing. He got his hand over her hand and forced her cold fingers to grip, and he put his mouth by her ear and he said, "You do not get to fall down." Rewrote it down. Help me, Hermione. Light. And he poured everything he had down the joined bond. Everything, 7 years of it, the good chair and the book about flying and the staircase and the kitchen and the whole warm household, poured it into the winding where the redress was pulling her thread loose, and the joined light, which the branch had current mot break, which what might with the glue. So why have they hide warmth into the cold place, life into the fraying thread. Harry against the redress, one boy's stubborn 7-year love against 300 years of the House of Black's insurance, and it was not enough to win, but it was, barely, enough to hold, to keep the thread from fraying all the way through, to keep her in the world one more hour, until the leaning eased and the cold withdrew and Hermione came back into her own eyes, gasping, alive, gripping his hand hard enough to hurt. "It's going to do that again," she said, when she could speak. She was shaking and she was already thinking, because thinking was the only place she was safe. "It's Harry, it's not going to wait for the compact to mature, it's going to keep leaning, it's going to keep taking runs at me, and every time it does, you'll hold me but you can't hold me forever, you can't sit with your hand on mine for the rest of both our lives, and one time it'll come when you're not there, and there won't be anyone to turn my light back on." She looked at him, and the calm over her calm. "We don't have until we come of age. That was the timeline in my head, and it's wrong. We have until it catches me alone. We have to do the release the day we come of age. The very first hour it's legal. Not a day of school year left to spare. Because every day between now and then, this thing gets to take a run at killing me, and you have to be within arm's reach every single time or I die." A breath. That's the real trap. She doesn't even have to beat us. She just has to make us live like this. Me a heartbeat from dead every day, you unable to be more than a room away from me for 8 months, until one of us breaks or slips or the leaning finds me alone. That's Cassiopeia. That's how she fights. Not a blow. A slow lean on the thing you love until you do anything to make it stop. And so the autumn became a vigil. Harry did not leave her side, he could not, and did not want to, and the two things had become impossible to tell apart, which was its own kind of victory. The branch had not intended. They moved through the castle within arm's reach of each other, and the whole school assumed the obvious thing, and let them, and the assumption was a cover better than any Nix could have built. 3 more times the cold came for Hermione that autumn, and 3 times Harry was there, hand over hand, mouth by her ear, pouring 7 years down the bond, and 3 times the joined light held her in the world by a thread, and each time it cost him more, and each time she came back paler and more certain, and each time she came back paler and more certain, and each time she came back paler and more certain, and each time the household in the south grew grimmer, because Nix's glass showed the leaning worsening, the thinness spreading, the reed's long page cork a how ache. The vigil did what vigils do to people, which is that it wore the kindness off the edges of them, and left the love underneath exposed and raw. They fought that autumn, for the first time in 7 years. Really fought. Not the sharp affectionate arguing that had been the weather of them since a tea shop, but the ugly kind. The kind that comes when 2 exhausted people are frightened for the same thing, and can only reach the fear by reaching each other. It happened in November, after the 3rd attack, when Harry had held her through the cold for the 3rd time and come out of it gray and hollowed, and had made the mistake of saying, "Too tired to arrange it kindly. You have to stop staying up in the library. If it comes when you're up a ladder in the stacks, and I'm asleep 2 floors down," and Hermione running on no sleep and a fraying thread and the unbearable knowledge that she was the reason he looked hollowed, had turned on him. "So I should stop reading? That's your plan? I should sit in a chair where you can watch me and stop being myself so I'm easier to guard? Do you hear yourself? You sound like them, Harry. You sound like the house. Arrange the girl where she's convenient. That's not what I've kept myself alive my whole life with my mind, and now the one thing that might save me is in a book somewhere in that library, and you want me to sit still and be watched. I want you to not die," Harry had shouted. And it had come out at last, the loudness that neither of them ever used, because loudness never reached either of them, and it did not reach her now. It just hung in the room, ugly and true, and they had both flinched from it, from the sound. From the childhoods it came out of. From the sight. From the childhoods it came out of. From the sight of the one person in the world who never raised his voice to her raising it because he was that far past the end of himself. And Hermione had gone white and silent, and Harry had put his hands over his face, and for a moment the whole thing Cassiopeia had built teetered exactly where she wanted it. 2 people ground down far enough that the bond began to feel like the weight and not the wing. It was Hermione who came back from it first, because she was the braver of the 2 about the hardest things. She crossed the room and pulled his hands down from his face and said quietly, in the flat true voice, "I'm sorry, you're not them, you'll never be them. You shouted because you're keeping me alive by hand, an hour at a time, for 8 months, and no one on this earth could do that and stay gentle. And I threw the house in your face because I'm so frightened I can't hold it anymore, so I threw it at you. Which is the worst thing I could have done, because you're the only one who's never once tried to arrange me." She had held on to his hands. This is what she wants. Right now. This exact minute. Us like this. She can't break the light, so she's trying to break the people, wear us down until we do her work for her, and call the whole thing a mercy. And I nearly gave it to her just now, so no more. We fight, that's fine, we've always fought, but we fight like us and not like people she's grinding down. Deal? Deal, Harry had said, into her hair, wrung out, holding on. And the fight had passed and left the love under it more exposed than ever, and they had come out the other side of it harder to break than before. Because a bond that has survived its people at their ugliest is a different and stronger thing than a bond that has only ever known them at their best. And Cassiopeia, for all her genius, had never once in her long cold life let anyone see her ugly, and so had never learned the one thing the vigil taught. Cassiopeia escalated in December. She did it the way she did everything, through paper and courtesy. She filed, before the elders, a formal petition of dereliction against Sirius, on the grounds that the head of the house was knowingly permitting a bound daughter of the line to be consumed by the redress, rather than resolving the compact, that his refusal to renounce it, his sentimental insistence on leaving the choice to 2 children, was itself the negligence that was killing the girl. It was, Hermione said when she read it, another beautiful and monstrous piece of work. Cassiopeia had woken the curse that was killing Hermione and was now suing Sirius for not stopping it, casting herself as the girl's would-be rescuer, and Sirius as the man whose stubbornness held the knife. If the elders bought it, if even one hinge turned, Sirius would be removed, the office would fall, and the release would die with it. The 8-month war for the seat had begun in earnest, and it would run all the way to June, in chambers and by owl and in the slow accumulation of votes, while 2 exhausted young people 200 miles north kept a girl alive 1 hour at a time and waited for a birthday that was either a door or a grave. The tearing began not with a fight, but with a silence, which was worse because in 4 years of honesty they had never once been silent with each other. Hermione decided. She decided alone, which was the first breach of the treaty, and she decided it in the cellar in front of Nyx's secret glass at 2 a.m, looking at the thinness in the light that was, she now understood, the redress beginning to weight itself onto her, the deep magic already leaning its ancient thumb onto the scale of her. She decided that she would take the release, that she would stand up when they came of age and let Harry go, freely, in front of the magic, and live. And she decided the second, worst thing, the thing that broke the treaty in half, that she would not let Harry choose it with her, that she would make him believe it was her choice alone, her wanting out, her old hatred of the cage finally winning, because she knew Harry, she knew him to the floor of him, and she knew that if he understood she was releasing him to save her own life, he would refuse. He would insist on some third path. He would go and do something magnificent and reckless and fatal, trying to find a way to keep her and save her, and there was no such way. She had looked. There was no such way, and the only thing worse than losing him would be watching him die looking for a way not. So she lied. Hermione Granger, who had built her whole self on being the one person who would tell the truth, looked at Harry, whom she loved past the reach of her own words, and lied to him. And it was the hardest magic she ever worked, and it nearly killed her more surely than any redress. She started small. She stopped saving him the good chair. She let a week of library evenings pass with an excuse each time. When he found her, and he found her, in the cellar, at the glass, because Harry had spent 7 years learning where Hermione went when she was frightened, she did not turn around, and she said, to the guttering light and not to him, in a voice she had sanded flat and dead on purpose, "I've decided to take the release, when we come of age. I wanted you to hear it from me, Hermione. It's the way out, Harry. It's the way out we've looked for since we were 11. I'd be a fool not to take it." She still did not turn around. She could not turn around. If she turned around, he would read her face. He always read her face, and the whole lie lived in her keeping her face away from him. I never wanted this. You know I never wanted it. I've said so every week. For 7 years, it's point 5 of the treaty. We're allowed to hate it. Well, I still hate it, and here's a way to be free of it that doesn't cost either of us anything, and I'm taking it. That's all, I thought. I owed you an honest heads up. So there it is. I'm out. When we come of age, I'm out. And Harry stood in the cellar doorway and looked at the back of her head and knew with a certainty that came up from below the place, certainty lives, that she was lying. He knew it the way he knew the ground was there when the staircase said it wasn't. He knew it because she wouldn't turn around, and because she'd used the word honest while lying, which was the tell of a person forcing themselves, and because the flatness in her voice was not the flatness of not caring, but the flatness of caring so much you had to press it down with both hands, or it would come out as a scream. He knew that flatness, he'd invented that flatness, he'd used it his own oldest armor coming out of her mouth, and understood exactly what hiding. You're lying to me, he said quietly. You've never lied to me, not once in 7 years, and you're lying to me right now, and I want to know why. Her shoulders went rigid. I'm not. The redress falls on you. If we complete the compact, you die. So you're going to take the release to save your own life, which is the only sane thing to do, and I'd help you do it, Hermione. I'd stand up in front of the magic tomorrow and let you go if it kept you alive. You never had to lie about that. His voice was rising and he pulled it down. because raising it wouldn't reach her. Nothing loud ever reached either of them. They'd learned that in the same childhood from opposite directions. So it's not the release you're lying about, it's the why. You're not telling me you're releasing me to save yourself. You're telling me you're releasing me because you never wanted me. And those aren't the same lie. One of them's mercy and the other one's he understood it as he said it, the way he always understood things around her, in the act of saying the other one's you trying to make it easier for me. You think if I believe you're leaving because you want out, I'll let you go clean. And if I know you're leaving to save your life, I'll try to find a way to save it and keep you. And I'll die trying, and you can't watch that? So you're going to make me hate you a little. On purpose. So it doesn't hurt as much. So I don't go looking. He was across the cellar now, and he took her shoulder and turned her, gently, and she let herself be turned because she had run out of the strength not to, and her face was wet and furious and undefended, and it confirmed every word. You're going to break your own honesty, the one thing you built your whole self out of, to protect me from my own courage. Because you'd rather I think you never loved me than watch me die trying to keep you. Yes, Hermione said. It came out of her broken all the way open, the calm gone, the arithmetic gone, just a girl who had been carrying the whole weight of both their lives alone for a week. Yes, all right. Yes, because I did look, Harry. I looked for a week. I didn't sleep. I read everything. There is no third way. There's the release or there's my death. Those are the only two. And I know you. I know exactly what you are. You'll go and do something glorious and stupid, and you'll find some loophole that's really a way to put the price on yourself instead of me. You'll find a way to pay it for me. Don't tell me you wouldn't, because we both know you would. You walk off a 100-foot staircase on my 90%. You told me you would. You walk off a 100-foot staircase on my 90%. I would rather you spend your whole life thinking I was a cold, clever girl who used you to fight her battles and then walked away, than have you die to keep me. So yes, I was going to lie to you. For the rest of our lives. It was the bravest thing I could think of, and it was the worst thing I've ever done, and I'd been sick with it for 3 days, and you found me out in 4 minutes because you always find me out. You're the only person who ever has. And she stopped, because she had nothing left, and she stood in the cellar in the guttering light, and let him see all of it. The whole undefended ruin of her, which was the one thing she had spent the entire week trying to prevent. Harry held her while she came apart, in the cellar, under the thinning light, and he did not tell her it would be all right, because that would have been a lie, and they did not lie to each other. And he had just proven that neither of them could get away with it if they tried. When she was done, when she had cried herself down to the flat, exhausted floor of herself where thinking started again, he made her sit, and he sat across from her, and he took both her hands in the climber's grip, and he said the thing that would decide the rest of both their lives, and he said it not as a comfort but as a fact. In the flat, sure voice he'd learned from her, we're not taking a release. And I'm not going to die finding a loophole either. We're going to do the third thing. There is no third thing, Harry. I looked. You looked for a way to keep the compact and save your life. That's two things at once, and there isn't a way to do both. You're right. I believe you. You're always right about what's in the books. He held her hands so she couldn't pull them back into the thinking pose, so she had to stay in the room with him and not retreat into a folder. But that's because you were still thinking about it like the compact was the thing we were trying to save, and it isn't. It was never the thing we were trying to save. We hate the compact, Hermione. Point 5. We've hated it for 7 years. So why in God's name are we trying to find a way to preserve the exact thing we've hated the whole time? He watched her, watched the enormous engine of her mind hear it and start, slowly, to turn a different way. Cassiopeia thinks she's trapped us. She thinks we've got 2 doors, die, or take the release and lose each other. And she's built the whole thing on being sure we'll take the release because she's sure the compact is what holds us together. And if she makes the compact deadly, we'll cut it and drift apart. Because without the magic, what would we even be? He leaned in, but she's wrong about the one thing. She's wrong about the same thing everybody in that family has been wrong about since we were 11. She thinks the magic is what makes us. She thinks if she poisons the bond, she kills the thing between us. And she can't. Because the thing between us was never the bond, Hermione. It's not the compact. It never was. It's a book about flying in a good chair, and you turning my light back on in a library, and me stepping off a staircase on your 90%. None of that was the magic. The magic just put us in the room. We did the rest. So, and here it was, the whole answer. The thing that would take the last chapter to make true. But that was born in a cellar at 2 a.m. under a guttering light. So we take the release. Yes, we take her exit. But not to save your life by losing each other. We take it to end the compact, to kill the redress by killing the thing it feeds on, and then, when it's gone, when there's no magic left in the room at all, no binding, no curse, no 400-year-old anything, just 2 free people standing in an empty room the house can't touch anymore, then I ask you again, with nothing making you say yes, with nothing making me, and you answer however you answer, and it's ours, and Cassiopeia gets a dissolved compact and an open door and thinks she's won, and she'll have handed us the one thing she was fighting for 7 years to keep from us. He was close now, their foreheads almost touching over their stacked hands. She thinks the release is her victory. It's ours. It's been ours the whole time and she built the door herself. The compact was the cage. Fine, let her take the cage. We were never the cage. We're what grew in it. And what grew in it doesn't need it and never did." Hermione stared at him. The engine of her mind had stopped turning against the problem and started turning with it, and he could see it, could see her running it forward, checking it, stress testing it the way she stress tested everything, looking for the flaw, and not finding one, because for once there wasn't one, because Harry Potter had done the thing Hermione Granger did, and found the load-bearing point of the whole trap, and the load-bearing point Cassiopeia's certainty, the two out of Yuri. "It could work," she whispered. "Harry, the Redress feeds on the maturing compact. If we dissolve the compact before it matures, there's nothing for the price to collect at. The curse dies with its host. And then we're just people. No bond, no magic, nothing making us." She was gripping his hands now as hard as he was gripping hers. "But, Harry, that's the terrifying part. You understand what you're saying? If we do this, if we dissolve it, then whatever we say to each other after is real. It's not the magic, there's no bond, there's no compulsion, there's nothing to blame it on or hide behind. If I say yes to you in an empty room, it's just me saying yes. No cage to be furious at, no fate to rent, nothing to blame it on or hide behind. If I say yes to you in an empty..." "I know," Harry said. "That's the whole point. That's the only way it ever counts. You told me that. In Diagon Alley. When we were 11. You said it twice because you were scared." He almost smiled and didn't, because it was too big a moment for smiling. As long as we're choosing it over the top of hating it, and not because the magic made us. That's the only way it counts. You were 11 and you already knew the answer. We just had to spend 7 years earning the right to say it with nothing forcing our hands. He pressed his forehead to hers, finally, the last inch gone. "So let's earn it. Let's take her exit. Let's dissolve the thing we've hated our whole lives. And then let's find out, with nothing making us, nothing at all, whether we'd choose each other in an empty room." They did not go straight up. For a while they stayed in the cellar, in the guttering light, sitting close on the cold stone with their backs against the old brick, because there is a kind of decision so large that you cannot walk away from the place you made it right away. You have to sit in it a while first, the way you sit in a doctor's car park after the appointment before you can drive. "I want to say the frightened thing," Hermione said after a long silence. "Out loud, to you, while it's just us and no plan and no Sirius and no Nix. Because once we go upstairs, it becomes an operation, and I'll go into operation mode, and I won't be able to say it anymore. I'll only be able to do it." She had her knees pulled up and her chin on them, not looking at him, which was how she said the things that cost her, and Harry let her not look at him, which was how she said the things that cost her, and Harry let her not look at him, because 7 year but tap my head bap. The frightened thing is this. We're going to dissolve the one thing that's ever explained us. For 7 years, whenever it got too big, whenever what's between us got bigger than I could hold, I had somewhere to put it. I could say it's the compact, it's the magic, it's not really me, it's the binding, the binding's making me feel it. I never chose this, and that was a lie. I knew it was a lie by 5th year, but it was a comfortable lie. It was a wall I could lean the whole weight of what I feel against, so I never had to hold it up myself. She turned her face finally, and looked at him in the cold light, and we're about to knock that wall down, on purpose. And I'm frightened of the empty room the way I've never been frightened of anything, more than the redress, more than dying, because dying I can be organized about, but standing in a room with nothing to blame what I feel on and finding out whether I'm brave enough to just own it, out loud, that terrifies me, Harry. That's the real thing I'm scared of, not the right, after. Harry didn't tell her it would be all right. He had learned from her that the coward's comfort was to promise a good outcome, and the brave comfort was to promise company through a bad one. "I know," he said, "I've got the same wall. Every time it got too big, I told myself the same thing. It's the magic. Don't trust it. It might not be real. Don't build anything on it in case it falls down. And it was a lie for me too, and it was comfortable for me too. And I'm scared of the after just as much as you are." He found her hand in the dark, but here's the thing I keep coming back to. A wall you lean the weight of your whole heart against. That's not a wall holding you up, Hermione. That's a wall you're hiding behind. And I'd rather stand in an empty room, holding my own weight terrified, than spend the rest of my life leaning on a lie because it's more comfortable than being brave. We've been brave about everything except this. We were brave about the cold in the staircase and Cassiopeia and the elders. This is the last thing we've been cowards about, both of us, and it's the only one that actually matters, and I don't want to be a coward about the one that matters. He squeezed her hand. So we knocked the wall down, and we're scared, and we do it scared. That's allowed. That was always allowed. It's practically the whole treaty. Hermione was quiet for a moment. Then she said, almost smiling, "You've got much better at this. Talking. When we were 11, you could barely finish a sentence that wasn't about Quidditch." "I had a good teacher," Harry said. "She talks too much." It rubbed off. And Hermione laughed once in the cold cellar under the dying light, the real one, and then she got up and pulled him up after her, and they went to knock down the last wall. They brought the plan up out of the cellar to Sirius and Nyx before dawn, and Nyx heard it out in silence. And at the end of it, he did not tell them it was clever, and he did not tell them it was mad. He told them the one thing that mattered, which was the thing that would shape everything still to come. The mutual release, he said, cannot be worked by the two of you alone. That is the flaw. I am sorry. I have known it since the cellar, and I let you have the plan whole before I broke it, because you needed to believe in it first. He set his hands flat on the table. The release is a rite before the family magic, and the family magic will not open itself to a dissolution unless the rite is called and witnessed by the acting head of the House of Black. That is the covenant. Two bound parties may freely release each other, but only in the presence of the head, who alone can command the house to let them go. Without the head to call it, the magic will not hear you. You could stand in an empty room and say the words all night and the compact would not so much as flicker. That's fine, Harry said. Sirius is the head. Sirius is the head. Sirius calls it. Sirius has been begging to end this thing for 4 years. Sirius is the head today. Nyx's voice did not change, and that was how they knew. You come of age in June, 8 months, and Cassiopeia Black has just learned that her release, her victory, her open door, requires the very man she has spent 7 years trying to remove, standing in a chamber, freely calling the right. She will not have missed that. She has never missed anything. He looked at Sirius, who had gone still by the range. She does not need to beat the release. She needs only to make sure that when the day comes, there is no legitimate head to call it. If she can remove Sirius from the office before June, by a vote, by a forged dereliction, by the redress itself, if she can twist it to name him negligent for letting the girl waste, then the seat falls vacant, or worse, falls to her branch's candidate, and no one will call the right that frees you. Hermione lives 8 more months a heartbeat from death, comes of age still bound, and dies at the maturing with no head, to release her and no compact left that anyone in power wishes to dissolve. He let it land. That is the real shape of the war now. It was never about beating you in the release. It is about who holds the office on the day you come of age. She will spend the next 8 months trying to take Sirius's seat out from under him, and we will spend them making it unbreakable. Because the release you have built is perfect, children. It is the finest piece of thinking I have seen in 30 years, and I have watched 2 of you do a great deal of thinking, but it opens only with a key, and the key is the office, and the office is now the thing Cassiopeia and I are going to fight over until June, in the dark, while you two keep a girl alive 1 hour at a time. The kitchen was silent, and then Sirius Black, who had said nothing through the whole of it, stood up from beside the range, and there was a thing in his face none of them had seen. Not the reckless grin, not the stillness of the man who'd lost 12 years, but something harder and older. The head of the House of Black remembering, at last, that the office was not only a burden, but a weapon. Then she's made her first mistake in 7 years, Sirius said quietly, because she's finally told me what my office is for. I've hated this seat since the day I took it. I took it for Harry, to protect the airship, and I spent 4 years feeling like a fraud in my own family's chair. He looked at the 2 of them, and at Nyx, but she needs me gone, which means the seat matters, which means hold it instinct is this. It's this rotten family has had in 400 years. Not because I want the family, God knows I don't, but because the one thing standing between an old woman and Hermione's grave is a chair with my name on it, and she is going to have to pry me out of it with her cold dead hands. And I have been to prison. Cousin, I have been to prison. I have been to prison. I have bend, not break me. And she would the act you two keep her alive. Nyx, you keep me legitimate. And come June, I will stand in that chamber and I will call the right that ends this thing, and I will watch 400 years of black cruelty dissolve out of 2 people it never deserved. That's what my office is for. That's what it was always for. It just took the worst person in my family to make me see it. Above them, in the glass, the thinning light did not steady. It could not. The redress was already leaning its ancient thumb onto Hermione's life, and it would go on leaning until the compact was dissolved and the curse starved with it. But something else happened in the light that night that Nyx, watching from the shadows of the cellar stair where he had come down unnoticed and stayed, would record in no book and tell no soul. The 2 threads at the winding, which had burned as one light for 4 years, did not thin apart under the redress. They wound tighter, as if the deep magic that held the world in its shape had felt 2 children in an empty cellar decide to give up the very bond that joined them for the sake of the choice underneath it, and had understood, in whatever way a thing older than choosing can understand, that it was about to lose the most remarkable pairing in 400 years of its keeping and did not want to. The magic could not stop them. It had built the walls. It could not decide the room. But for the first time in its long, cold cosmic patience, the binding that had waited 7 years to see what the children would make of it seemed, in the guttering dark, almost to grieve. Chapter 4. End. Chapter 5. The room with no walls. In the morning she was supposed to become free. Hermione Granger woke before the sun and lay in the dark of a room in number 12 and did the sum one more time, the way she had done it every morning for 8 months, and got the same answer she always got, which was that today she would either be released or she would be dead by nightfall, and that there was no third column in the ledger no matter how many times she added it. She had turned 17 at midnight. Harry had turned 17 a month before, in July, and had spent that month in a state of held breath waiting for hers, because the release required them both of age, and until she crossed into her majority, the rite could not be called. Now she had crossed it. The compact was mature, and a mature compact was a compact ready to complete, ready to ripen into the marriage it had been built 400 years ago to make, which meant the red dress was ready to collect its weighted price at the completion, and which meant the deep magic had begun, in the small hours after midnight, to lean on her thread with a strength it had never used before. She could feel it. It was not an attack anymore, not a cold run at her that Harry could hold off with his hand over hers. It was a pressure now, constant, patient, enormous, the whole weight of 300 years settling onto the single thread of her life and beginning, slowly, gently, irresistibly, to pull it loose from the world. She had perhaps until nightfall. After that the thread would fray through whether Harry held it or not, because you cannot hold the thread against the weight of the sky with one hand forever. The rite was called for noon. They had won the war for the office, barely, in the last week. Cassiopeia's petition of dereliction had gone before the elders in May, and it had been the closest of all of them, and Sirius had held his seat by a single vote, the old man whose dead son had liked things the house had no use for, who had looked at Cassiopeia's beautiful monstrous argument that Sirius was killing the girl by refusing to save her, and had said in the elders' chamber, in a voice that shook with age and something older than age, "My son died trying to do one decent thing in this family. I have watched my whole life for one more decent thing to vote for before I go. I will not call it dereliction to let two children choose. I have called too many things by the wrong name in 90 years, not this one." And he had voted for Sirius, and the seat had held, and Sirius Black was still, that morning, the acting head of the House of Black, still legitimate, still able to stand in a chamber at noon and call a rite of dissolution. And Cassiopeia had lost her long war for the office by a single ancient decent vote, and had gone very quiet, and quiet from Cassiopeia was the most dangerous sound in the world. Harry was awake when Hermione came down. Of course he was. He had not really slept since her birthday. He had sat up in the kitchen with Nyx's secret glass, watching the pressure lean into her light, ready to run for her the moment it turned to an attack. He looked terrible. He looked, Hermione thought, exactly as terrible as a person looks who has decided to hold the whole weight of the sky off someone by hand, and has been doing it, in shifts, for 8 months. She sat down across from him at the scrub table, where they had run a war and burnt eggs and confessed the truth. And neither of them said good morning because it was not one and might not become one. "Say it back to me," Hermione said instead. "The plan, all of it, out loud. I need to hear it in your voice, not mine. My voice has been saying it in my head all night and it's stopped sounding real." So Harry said it back to her, the whole architecture of it, quiet and exact in the gray kitchen dawn. At noon, Sirius would call the rite before the family magic, in the ancestral chamber below number 12, where the house kept its deepest instruments, with the elders witnessing as the covenant required and Cassiopeia's people watching for any flaw. Harry and Hermione would stand before the magic, and each, freely of age, release the other. The compact, the sealed 400-year-old unbreakable by its parties compact, would dissolve, because the third means of dissolution was exactly this and always had been. Mutual release before the head, and the instant it dissolved, the redress would die, because the redress fed on the maturing compact and there would be no compact left to mature, no completion for the price to collect at. The curse would starve in the same instant its host vanished, and the pressure on Hermione's thread would simply cease, and she would live. Cassiopeia would have her open door and her empty compact and her reassignable airship, and would believe, watching, that she had finally won, that she had ground 2 children down until they cut the bond themselves and called it mercy. And then, Harry said, and here his voice changed because this was the part that was theirs and not the plan's. When it's done, when there's no compact, no redress, no magic, no 400-year-old anything in the room, just us, standing in an empty room the house can't touch anymore. I ask you again, with nothing making you say yes. And you answer however you answer. And whatever you answer, it's ours, and it's real, and it's the first thing in your whole life and mine that nobody arranged and nothing compelled and no cage produced. Just a choice. Naked. Ours. He looked at her across the table. That's the plan. That's all of it. Did I get it right? You got it right, Hermione said. And then, because it was the last morning of the compact and the treaty's first term was honesty, and she was not going to break it now of all times, I'm frightened of the second part more than the first. The dying part I've made my peace with. I've had 8 months. You can make peace with anything in 8 months if you're organized about it. But the choosing part. Harry, when it's gone, when there's genuinely nothing making either of us, what if I get there to the empty room and I can't? Not because I don't. You know But because I've spent 7 years learning to say the true things sideways, in code, to the fire, never to your face, and this is the one that has to be said to your face, straight, with nothing to hide behind, and I've never in my life managed to receive a true thing that way, let alone give one, and I'm terrified that the compact was the thing that let me feel it, and once it gone, I prisdedapt, and once it gone, I plied that set, the way you freeze when you think about your feet. She was gripping the edge of the table. What if it turns out I could only love you inside the cage? What if I get to the empty room and find out the walls were holding me up? Harry reached across the table and took her hands off the edge of it and into the climber's grip, the grip their hands had learned in a library and never once forgotten. Then I'll wait, he said, in the empty room. As long as it takes. There's no redress anymore. Remember, the second the compact's gone, you're not dying anymore. You're just free. And free means we've got time, all of it the whole rest of our lives, and I'll spend as much of it as you need standing in an empty room waiting for you to be able to say the true thing to my face. I waited 11 years in a cupboard for anything good to happen at all. I can wait a while longer for the best thing. He held her hands. And if it turns out you can only love me inside the cage, then we'll find that out too. Honestly, the way we've done everything, and it'll be sad and it'll be true, and I'll still be glad we did it, because a real answer in an empty room is worth more than 100 years of a beautiful answer you were never sure was yours. That was the whole point. That was always the whole point. Not to keep you, to find out if I get to. Hermione looked at him for a long moment. The pressure leaned on her thread. The sun came up gray over the crooked roofs. Noon, she said. Noon, said Harry. Before noon, in the last hour, Sirius found Harry alone at the top of the cellar stair and did the thing he had never quite managed in 4 years of being a godfather, which was to say a serious thing, without a joke in front of it. I've been rehearsing the rite all week, Sirius said. The words, the calling. I could say it in my sleep. And this morning I realized I've been rehearsing the wrong part. He leaned on the cold stone doorframe, because the words are easy. What I couldn't work out how to do was stand in that chamber and watch the magic take the two of you apart, even knowing it's the plan, even knowing it's what saves her, and not lose my nerve. Because I know what it is to have the thing you love taken by this family, Harry. I spent 12 years in a cell for it, and every part of me that's still a bit mad from those 12 years is screaming that you don't give the thing you love back to the House of Black, not ever, not for any reason, because the house takes and it does not return. He looked at his godson, and then I looked at the two of you at breakfast and I understood the part I got wrong. You're not giving her back to the house, you're taking her out of it. The rite looks like a surrender, and it's the exact opposite. It's the first time in 400 years anyone's walked into that chamber and used the house's own deepest magic to set someone free of it. Your father would have. And there it was again, the place his voice always went, and this time he let it go and came back from it. Your father and mother went into the ground protecting you from having your life decided by other people. And here you are, 17, about to stand under the family's captured sky and take the last decision back into your own hands. I don't think there's a thing I could be prouder of. I wanted to say it before in case the chamber takes my voice, which it might. Harry didn't have words for it. He was getting better at words. Hermione was right, but there were still some sizes of thing he couldn't fit his mouth around, and this was one. So he did the thing he'd learned from a girl who could only give the truth sideways. He answered it with an action instead of a sentence. He crossed the last of the landing and put his arms around his godfather, hard, the way he had wanted to and not known how to since he was 14 and a stranger cooked him terrible eggs in a dead house and made it a home. Sirius held on. Below them the chamber waited, and the sky it kept, and the whole apparatus of 400 years. Don't lose your nerve, Harry said, into his godfather's shoulder. You're the key. Whatever the chamber does to your voice, you say the words. That's all you have to do. Hermione and I will do the rest. We've been doing the rest since we were 11. The chamber below number 12 had not been opened in a generation, and it was older than the house above it by centuries. Older, Nick said, than the family's memory of itself. You went down to it by a stair that had no lamps, and Harry and Hermione went down it hand in hand. Not because they were afraid of the dark, but because they had learned in the dark of a staircase 7 years ago that the dark was where they held on. And they were not going to unlearn it now. The chamber was round and domed, and the dome was not stone. Harry looked up and could not, at first, make his eyes agree to what they saw. The way he had not been able to make his eyes agree to the shape of a Dementor. The dome was the sky, not a painting of it, not an enchantment of it. The actual deep field of night, held somehow inside a room 100 feet under London at noon, every star of it burning cold and patient and near. And Harry understood, standing under it, why the House of Black named its children after stars and thought it owned them. Because this was where the house kept its power, in a room full of the real and captured heavens, and a family that has the night sky in its cellar begins. Over 400 years, to believe it made the light, and at the center of the dome, directly overhead, there was one place where the stars were wound together. A knot of them, 2 threads of star stuff twisted so tight that only the twisting showed, burning brighter than all the rest, and Harry knew it before Nix said a word. It was them. He was the joined light, not seen to a glass this time, but present, here, the true thing the witness glass had only ever been a small cold copy of. 7 years of choosing each other, written into the sky of the room that held the world in its shape, and around it spreading out across the whole dome, the lattice of smaller curves he had first seen as a diagram on a page of vellum when he was 11, the architecture of the binding, the room the magic had built them, no longer a drawing but the thing itself, vast and near and alive. The elders stood around the edge of the chamber in a ring. Cassiopeia stood among them, still and pale and beautiful, watching with eyes that missed nothing. Sirius stood at the room's heart, beneath the joined light, in robes he hated, holding the office he had finally understood, and Nyx stood at his shoulder. And Harry and Hermione walked out to the center, under the wound-together stars that were the truth of them, and stopped and turned to face each other. And the pressure leaned on Hermione's thread so hard now that Harry could see it in her, could see her holding herself upright against the whole weight of the sky by will alone, and he took her hands. "It is time," Sirius said, and his voice filled the domed dark. "By the covenant of the House of Black, I, acting head, call the right of mutual release. Let the family magic witness two of age, freely willing, and let it open itself to their choosing." He drew breath. "Harry James Potter, Hermione, Jean Granger, you are bound as children, without your leave, into a compact of this house. You come now of age, the magic will hear you. Speak your release, each to the other, freely. And if it is freely given and freely received, the compact will dissolve, and you will be, before the oldest law this family holds, free of each other and of us." A pause. "Speak when you are ready, and know that the magic can taste a lie and will not open for one. Whatever you say here must be true, all the way down, or it will not work at all." Cassiopeia spoke, then, from her place at the edge of the ring, and it was her last card, and she played it with the same lethal courtesy she had played every card for 7 years, because she had understood from the page that the magic would not open for a lie, and she meant to make one true. "Before they speak," she said, mild, reasonable, addressing the elders and not the children, which was how she got a knife in under a courtesy. "The covenant requires the release be freely given. I would only observe, as a friend to this rite, which I have long wished to see performed, that a release given to escape a curse is not free. It is coerced. The girl is dying. Of course she will say the words. A drowning woman will say anything to reach the shore. Can the magic truly call it a free release when one of the two speaks with a curse's hand at her throat? I ask only for the sake of the rite's validity. It would be a shame to dissolve a compact improperly and have it reassert." She let reassert hang in the domed dark, small and cold and poisonous, and Harry understood exactly what she was doing because he had spent 7 years learning her. She was trying to plant, in the last possible second, a doubt to make Hermione's release feel coerced, even to Hermione, so that when she spoke it, the magic would taste the doubt and refuse to open, and the rite would fail, and the vigil would go on until the raid ran. One last attempt to make staying together the price. And it was Hermione who answered her, before Sirius could, before Nyx could. Hermione Granger, half dead on her feet, with the weight of the sky on her thread, who lifted her head and looked across the chamber at the cleverest and most dangerous person who had ever tried to arrange her life, and said, in the flat, clear voice that had once corrected a waiter about a tea shop's brickwork, "You're right, that a drowning woman will say anything to reach the shore." A breath held against the pressure. "But I'm not releasing him to reach the shore. I worked that out months ago, in a cellar, and it's the whole reason your trap was always going to fail. You just couldn't see it because you've never once in your life done a thing that wasn't for your own advantage, so you assume no one else has either. I'm not releasing him to save my life. Saving my life is a side effect. I'm releasing him because he was put in a cage as a baby and no one should die in a cage or live in one, and I'd rather he were free even if it cost me everything, and it nearly is going to. That's not a drowning woman grabbing ashore, Cassiopeia. That's the opposite. That's me letting go of the one thing that's kept me upright for 8 months because it's his to have back, not mine to keep. The magic can taste the difference. You can't, because you've never given anyone anything in your life that you didn't expect to get back with interest. But the magic can. Watch it." She turned from Cassiopeia, dismissing her in front of every elder in the room, the way you turn from a problem you have finished solving. "I'm ready, Sirius. Let it taste me. It'll find no coercion in it because there isn't any, only a choice. Call the right." And Cassiopeia Black, who had not been dismissed by anyone in 40 years, went silent. Because there was nothing to answer. Because the girl had told the exact truth in front of the one witness that could not be fooled, and had dared the magic to check, and a woman who has built her whole power on the fact that the truth can always be arranged, has no move against someone who simply tells it and invites the test. This was the moment Cassiopeia had built her whole endgame on, and this was the moment it broke, and it broke because of the one thing she had never understood in 7 years of watching a glass, that she had been watching the wrong light. Hermione went first because she always went first on the brave ones. She looked at Harry, under the wound stars with the weight of the sky pulling her thread loose, and she said, in a voice that did not go sideways, that did not go to the fire, that went straight to his face for the first time in 7 years. "Harry, I release you." The words fell into the domed dark, freely, of my own will. Not because I'm frightened, not because they made me, not because a curse is killing me, and this is the way out. I release you because the compact was a cage, and neither of us built it, and no one should be kept in a cage they didn't choose, not even by someone who loves them, especially not by someone who loves them. Especially not by someone who loves them. I release you from the magic that bound us when we were 11 and couldn't say no. I give you back to yourself, whole, free, nobody's. Not the houses, not the compacts. Her voice held, and not mine. I let you go. And the magic heard her and tasted it and found it true, and half the joined light overhead began to come undone. Harry felt it, felt the winding of the two threads loosen where hers pulled free of his, felt 7 years begin to unmake themselves in the sky above them, and it was the worst thing he had ever felt, and he made himself feel all of it, because the whole meaning of what they were doing was that it had to be real. And he said, straight back to her, his hands tight on hers, "Hermione, I release you." The dark took it, freely, of my own will. I release you from the compact, from the house, from the heir law, from 400 years of a family that decided you were an impurity to be cleansed out of its line. I release you from all of it, and from me, from the boy they chained to you before either of us could talk. You don't owe me a bond you didn't choose. You never did. I give you back to yourself, whole and free and nobody's, and I let you go. His voice cracked and he did not stop it, because a true thing does not need to be said steadily, only truly. I let you go. And the magic heard him and tasted it and found it true, and the other half of the joined light came undone, and the two threads that had burned as one for 7 years unwound in the sky and drew apart, two separate stars again. An inch apart, the way they had sat before a treaty was signed in a tea shop when they were 11, and the compact dissolved, all 400 years of it. The seal, the diagram, the vellum, the binding, the redress, the whole vast architecture of the room the magic had built them, it let go all at once, and the lattice of curves across the dome faded like frost off a window in the sun, and the enormous pressure that had been leaning on Hermione's thread simply ceased, between one heartbeat and the next, gone, because there was no compact left to mature and no curse left to feed and nothing in all the sky still holding them in a room. But the redress did not die quietly. That was the thing none of them had reckoned. That a magic 300 years old, leaning its whole weight on a life, does not simply let go when the ground goes out from under it, it grabs. In the half-second between the compact's dissolution and the curse's starvation, in the last flicker before the redress had nothing left to feed on, it made its final and most violent grab for the thing it had been promised, and it went for Hermione's thread with everything it had left, all 300 years of it thrown at once into one last pull to fray her loose before it died. A curse trying to collect its price in the very instant the price was being abolished. A drowning thing dragging her down with it went under. Hermione's knees went. The light in her guttered. Harry felt it through their joined hands, felt the thread of her tear half loose from the world in one savage wrench, felt her start to go, and there was no bond anymore to pour warmth down, no compact, no joined light to feed her back. All of it dissolving overhead in the same moment, so that for one endless instant Harry Potter stood in the deepest chamber of the House of Black, holding a dying girl with none of the magic that had let him save her, before nothing left at all but his own 2 hands, and 7 years. So he used those. He did the library thing one last time, with nothing behind it but himself. He got both arms around her as she fell, and he put his mouth by her ear, and he said, not as a spell because he had no spell, just as a fact, just as the truest thing he had, you do not get to fall down. Not now. Not in the last second. We wrote it down when we were 11 and I am holding you to it. The curse is dying, Hermione. It's already dead. It's just grabbing on the way down. Don't let it take you with it. It's got nothing left. It's a drowning thing. It can't hold you if you don't let it. Help me. And he poured not magic, because there was none, but the whole of himself, every hour of the vigil and every burnt breakfast and every book about flying, down through his arms into the girl coming apart against his chest. And it was not enough. One a boy against 300 years. It was never going apart, except that it did not have to be enough. It only had to last 1 more second. Because the redress was starving even as it grabbed, dying even as it pulled, and the second passed and the compact finished dissolving overhead, and the curse ran entirely out of the thing that had fed it, and its grip, its terrible 300-year grip on the thread of Hermione Granger's life, simply opened, all at once, having nothing left to close on, and let her go. The pulls ceased. The weight lifted. The dying thing went under and did not take her with it, because a boy with no magic left had held her by the arms for 1 second past the end of the world, and 1 second was all it needed. She came back into her own eyes, gasping, alive, her whole weight in his arms, and above them the last of the redress guttered out into the dark and was gone. Gone forever. The curse dead in the same instant as the compact that had carried it, and Hermione Granger drew a breath that nothing in all the sky was any longer trying to stop, and Harry felt it go all the way into her, whole and free and hers. They were free. Both of them, standing under two separate stars in an empty dome with no bond between them at all, for the first time in 7 years. Hermione staggered. The sudden absence of the weight she'd been holding herself upright against nearly took her down, and Harry caught her, and she got her feet under her, and she stood, breathing, alive, the thread of her life no longer being pulled loose from the world, 17 and free and released. And she looked up at the two separate stars where their joined light had been, and then at Harry, and the empty room she had been so afraid of was all around them, the walls down, necking either of them. It is Sayer, fatal. Around the ring the elders stirred. It was done. The compact was dissolved, the covenant satisfied, the door the branch had wanted stood open. Cassiopeia Black, in her place at the edge of the chamber, let out a breath. Harry heard it, a small sound of a long war ending, and there was, on her beautiful, terrible face, the nearest thing to peace it had ever worn. She had won. She had ground 2 children down until they cut the bond themselves. The airship was reassignable. The line was clean. 7 years of work, complete. And Harry Potter turned his back on her, and on the elders, and on the office, and the covenant, and 400 years of the House of Black, and looked at Hermione Granger in the empty room with no walls, and asked her again, Hermione. Just her name first, the way he'd tried it out on his tongue in the gold light of Diagon Alley when he was 11, and it was a word in a new language. There's no compact. There's no magic. There's no curse, and no cage, and nothing making either of us do anything. Cassiopeia is one, as far as she knows. She's got her open door, and she's about to leave, and she thinks the story's over. His hands were still holding hers, but loosely now, so loosely that she could take them back at any moment, so that whatever she did next would be entirely her own. So here's the true thing, said to your face, straight, with nothing to hide behind, the way you were afraid neither of us could. I'm not going to say it sideways. I'm not going to say it to the fire. He looked at her, under the 2 separate stars. I choose you. Freely, knowing exactly what I'm choosing and that nothing's making me, not the boy the compact chained to you. Me, the person who grew up in the room next to yours for 7 years and would rather be in any room you're in than free in the whole open world. I chose you at 11 without knowing it was a choice. I chose you on a staircase on your 90%. I chose you across a kitchen table with a ledger under our hands. And now the cage is gone and I get to choose you for the first time with nothing forcing my hand. So I'm doing it out loud to your face. I choose you. Not the bond, not the magic. You. A breath. And now it's the scary part. The part you were afraid of. Because I've said mine, and there's nothing making you say anything back. And if you can't, if it turns out the walls were holding you up, then I meant what I said this morning. I'll wait. There's time now. All of it. I'll stand in this empty room as long as it takes. Hermione Granger looked at him. The pressure was gone. The compact was gone. 7 years of a cage she had never chosen were gone, dissolved into the domed dark, and she was free, entirely free, for the first time since she was 11 years old, and she could turn and walk out of this room and be nobody's and owe nothing to anyone, and go and be the brilliant, unattached witch she had once, at 11, furiously wanted to be. Nothing was making her stay. Nothing was making her speak. The walls were gone, and she was standing in the empty room and finding out in real time, in front of the elders and Cassiopeia and Sirius and Nyx and 2 separate stars, whether she could love him with nothing to hide behind. And she found that she could. She found that it had never been the cage. She found that the thing she had been so afraid of, that the compact was what let her feel and never have to say it, was exactly backwards. That the compact had been the thing she blamed it on for 7 years precisely so she would never have to stand here, free, and own it. And that now, with the blame gone and the cage gone and nothing left to resent, there was nothing between her and the truth but her own courage, and walked off a 100-foot staircase, and would not fail her and the truth, but her own courage had walked out. She did not say it sideways. She did not say it to the fire. She took his hands back, took them, chose them, of her own free will, in an empty room, and she said it straight to his face, the true thing, at last, with nothing to hide behind. I choose you too. Her voice did not go flat, and it did not go to the fire. It went clear and shaking and entirely hers, to him. Freely, knowing exactly what I'm choosing. I hated the compact, Harry. I hated it for 7 years. I hated it this morning. I'll hate it till I die, because they had no right. No one has the right to arrange a person before she can say no. And I'm so glad it's gone. I'm so glad we're standing here with nothing making us, because it means when I say this, it's mine. The first thing in my whole life that nobody arranged. I choose you. Not the bond. I just watched the bond come undone in the sky, and I felt relieved. And I felt it come undone, and I still, standing here, free, with the walls gone, I still want to be in the room with you. That's how I know it's real. The walls are gone and I'm still here. I was never being held up by the walls. I was being held up by you, and you're not a wall. You're a person. And a person you can walk away from. And I'm not walking away. I'm choosing to stay in a room that doesn't have any walls anymore, with you, because I'd rather build a room with you out of nothing than live in the whole free open world without you in it. She was crying, and she did not arrange it, and she did not hide it. I'd choose you, over the top of hating everything they did to get us here, which is the only way it counts. I told you that when I was 11. I said it twice because I was scared. I'm still scared, and I'm choosing you anyway. That's the whole of it. That's everything I've got. It's yours. And under the domed dark, under the two separate stars that had been one light and had come undone, something happened that was not in any covenant of the House of Black, that had no right and no clause and no 400-year precedent, that Nyx would search the deepest records for the rest of his life and never find, because it had never happened before. The two stars, freely unwound with no compact to bind them and no magic to compel them and nothing at all left in the sky to hold them in a room. The two stars chose. They moved. Not pulled together by a binding, there was no binding. Not wounded by the house had let them go. They crossed the inch of dark between them of their own accord, the way two people cross a kitchen, the way a girl once crossed a room to pull a boy's hands down from his face, and they wound together again, brighter than the compact had ever made them, because the compact had made a knot. This was not a knot, this was a choice, a light that was one light not because it could not be two, but because, having been freely given the whole open sky to burn separately in, it had looked at all that freedom and chosen of itself, to burn together. And the joined light blazed up in the dome, brighter than every captured star around it, brighter than the House of Black had ever seen its own sky burn. A light with no cage under it and no curse in it and no walls around it, held together by nothing in all the world, but two people who had been thrown away and had decided freely, at last, to keep each other. The elders cried out. Cassiopeia Black took a single step back, and the peace went off her face, and what replaced it was the thing she had never once shown anyone in her long, cold life, which was fear, real fear. The fear of a woman who has spent 7 years certain she understood the board and has just watched the board do something the rules said it could not do, because she had dissolved the compact. She had won. The magic that bound them was gone. She had made certain of it. She had watched it come undone with her own eyes. And the light overhead had rekindled anyway, brighter than ever, out of nothing, out of no binding at all. And there was not a clause in 400 years of the House of Black that could reach it, because it was not the house's anymore. It was not made of magic she owned, or law she could vote, or bond she could poison. It was made of a choice, freely given in an empty room, and there has never yet been a family, however old, however cruel, however clever, that found a way to legislate a free choice out of two people who have decided to make it. That's not possible, Cassiopeia said into the blazing dark. The compact is dissolved. There is nothing binding them. There is nothing making that light. No, said Nyx. He had stepped forward, and he was looking up at the joined light with an expression that 30 years of service to the House of Black had never once put on his face, and his voice, when it came, was not the flat, exact voice of the steward. It was the voice of a man who has waited his whole life to say a true thing and has finally been given the chance. No, cousin. There is nothing making that light. That is precisely the point. That is the whole of the point, and you have never once understood it in all your genius, because your family has never in 400 years produced a single thing that was not made to happen. Not a marriage, not an heir, not a loyalty, not a love. Everything the House of Black has ever had, it compelled. And so when you looked at those two children, you saw only the compulsion, and you spent 7 years trying to break the compulsion, certain that if you broke it, the light would die. He looked at her across the blazing chamber, but the compulsion was never the light. The compulsion was the cage. And you have just, with your own hands, at the cost of 7 years and the whole of your cleverness, removed the last wall of the cage and shown the entire House of Black, in its own oldest chamber, under its own captured sky, what these two are when nothing at all is making them. They are that. He gestured up at the light that no law could reach. A thing the House of Black has never made and never could, a bond that no one compelled. You did not defeat them, Cassiopeia. You freed them. And in freeing them, you have proven, to every elder in this room, before the deepest magic this family holds, that the thing you called pollution is the only thing in 400 years this house has produced that was worth a damn. Because it is the only thing it did not force. Go home. The war is over. You lost it in the moment you thought you'd won, which is the only way a person like you was ever going to lose anything at all. Cassiopeia Black left the chamber, and she did not come back. And the branch's long war for the house ended not with a defeat they could contest, but with one they could not even name, because you cannot appeal a free choice, and there is no clause against two people simply deciding to stay. The airship settled where it had always been meant to. The elders, having watched the deepest magic of their house blaze up in tribute to a bond no one had ordered, found, some of them slowly, some of them grudgingly, the old man whose son had liked useless things not grudgingly, the old man whose son had liked useless things not grudgingly at all, that they could no longer quite believe the story they had told themselves for 400 years, the story that said a house was made strong by purity and compulsion and the careful arrangement of its blood. They had just seen the strongest magic any of them had ever witnessed, and it had been made of neither purity nor compulsion. It had been made of a muggle-born girl and a half-blood boy choosing each other in an empty room. Tujerper did not survive that. Not all at once, and not in every heart, but the tapestry had a burn in it where Sirius' name had been scorched off, And within a year, there was a second change to the tapestry, and it was that the motto beneath the family tree had been unpicked, thread, by a great many hands and left blank, because the House of Black, for the first time in 400 years, was no longer sure what it stood for, and a house that is no longer sure it stands for cruelty has already, without knowing it, begun to stand for something else. That was the house. But the house was never the story, whatever it thought. The story was two people who climbed back up an unlit stair, hand in hand, from a chamber full of captured stars into a kitchen that had learned to be warm, where Sirius Black cooked a truly catastrophic celebratory breakfast, and Creature wept with joy, and made pastries, and Nick sat at the scrub table, and for the first time in anyone's memory, laughed. It was July, or nearly. The war was over. The compact was gone, and Harry and Hermione sat at the table where they had run all of it, shoulder to shoulder, where no glass would ever watch them again because there was no longer any glass and no longer anything to watch. Two free people with no bond between them but the one they had made themselves, and Hermione had her hand in Harry's on the table, freely, chosen, and she was all ready because she was Hermione, and 8 months a heartbeat from death had not changed one atom of who she was. What's 3 talking about? What they wake there with the rest is the river that did you da? Because I've decided, she was saying, that the first thing before anything, before we even think about what happens next, the very first thing we do with being free is we go somewhere with no history in it at all. No house, no chamber, no elders, nowhere anyone was ever named after a star or arranged or bound to anyone. Somewhere brand new where the only thing that's ever happened is us. And we look up at the actual sky, the real one, the free one, the one nobody captured and put in a cellar and pretended to own. And we find the constellations the Muggle way, the way that book taught you, where they're just beautiful and far away and nobodies. And we start there, with the sky nobody owns. That's where I want to start the part of my life that's mine. She was pink and shaking slightly and entirely undefended, and she had said the whole of it to his face without once going sideways. Because she had learned in an empty room that she could. Is that, I know it's not practical. There's 100 practical things, the airship and your NEWTs and Sirius. But I don't want the first thing we choose to be practical. I want it to be the sky. Is that all right? Harry looked at her. This girl who had ordered him plain tea because she didn't know what he liked, who had turned his light back on in a library, who had stepped off a staircase on her own 90% and made him believe it was 100, who had lied to save him and been found out in 4 minutes and forgiven, who had just, an hour ago, in a room with no walls, chosen him out of the whole free open sky. And he understood that he had spent 7 years being told by a magic 400 years old that this was the person he was bound to, and that the magic had been wrong about everything except this one thing, and that it had not even been right about this because the magic had said bound and the truth was so much larger than bound. The truth was chosen, and no cage in the world, however old, had ever built a thing as strong as that. It's all right, Harry said. The sky sounds perfect. Let's go find one nobody owns. And then, because it was true, and because they did not lie to each other, and because he had spent 7 years collecting the moments her guard slipped and had finally arrived at a life where her guard did not have to be up at all, I love you. Freely. To your face. With nothing making me. I've wanted to say it that way for a long time and I never could while the cage was up, in case it was the cage talking. It isn't. It's just me. I love you. And Hermione Granger, who could once only ever receive the truth sideways, in code, to the fire. Hermione Granger heard it said straight to her face in a warm kitchen, with nothing in all the world making him say it, and she did not get up, and she did not go to the fire, and she did not arrange first how she wanted to receive it. She just received it. Whole. The way you receive a thing you have finally, after 7 years in a war in an empty room, decided you are allowed to have. I love you too, she said, straight to his face. Freely. Hers. Over the top of everything they did to get us here, which is the only way it counts. She smiled. The real one. And this time she did not put her hand over her mouth to hide it, because there was no longer anything about herself she needed to hide from him, and there never would be again. Now eat your terrible breakfast. Sirius will be insulted, and then let's go and be free. Far below them, in the deepest chamber of the House of Black, under a dome of captured stars, one light burned on that no covenant had ordered, and no law could reach, and no cage had made. 2 stars that had been given the whole open sky and had chosen, freely, of themselves, with nothing making them, to burn as one. The House of Black had spent 400 years trying to build a thing like that by force, and had failed every time, in every generation, because it cannot be built by force. It can only be chosen. 2 children it threw away had chosen it, and it outlasted the Pact, and the House, and the war, and every cold, clever hand that had tried to unmake it. Because the one thing that is stronger than any magic that binds you is the moment you are finally free, and you look at the person the magic chose for you, standing in a room with no walls, and you choose them back. Chapter 5 End.